Nobody's going to buy your paintings. Instead of wasting your time on that, you should get a part-time job.
Timothy tore up the exhibition tickets right in front of me. Silently, I stared at the pieces scattered at my feet. Tears began to overflow. Becoming an illustrator was a dream of mine since childhood. I had finally realized that dream and managed to hold an exhibition. But it was denied. Every time I painted, Timothy, as well as my father-in-law Brian and mother-in-law Donna, made faces of disdain. Still, I endured and lived on. I never neglected household chores. After our daughter Cynthia was born, I managed parenting as well. I never dismissed Timothy's hobbies. Yet, this was too much. Quietly, I thought to myself, Timothy, I won't forgive you anymore. From now on, I will live as I please. I won't let anyone complain. Picking up the pieces of the tickets, I glared at Timothy. I, Jessica, am 35 years old. I was married to Timothy at 22. Our daughter, Cynthia, is starting elementary school this year. She seems to be struggling a bit with her studies, but she's getting along with her classmates and seems to be enjoying school life. As a mother, it's a relief. After sending Timothy and Cynthia off and finishing the housework, I sit at my desk. My job is an illustrator. Freelancer, I mainly take commissions from individual clients. Sometimes I get called by corporations, which makes me especially nervous. While requests have started to come in consistently, my family has never recognized my work. We live in a second-hand house, cohabiting with Brian and Donna. Brian and Donna don't work and are at home all day. They never help with the housework. They mainly complain about my cooking and berate me for only painting. My painting isn't just a hobby. I'm getting paid for it, and I have deadlines to meet. Since you're not a painter, paintings won't make money. No matter how many times I explain, it's the same response. Brian, Donna, and Timothy seem to think I'm lying just because I want to paint.
The pensions are much more reliable.
They demand an allowance every month. Since they're receiving pensions, they want me to give them money from that. It's proof of hard work in our younger days. If only someone would actually work. Brian and Donna criticize me together. I've suggested moving out to Timothy several times. Each time, Timothy would raise his voice.
What a heartless woman! They're my parents. Show some respect.
But Timothy always sided with Brian and Donna. Even when Donna accidentally broke a vase.
Mom's not at fault,
he said.
It's your fault for placing such a fragile thing here.
They insisted, and I was always made out to be the bad guy. Donna's main way of spending her allowance is on toys for Cynthia.
Thank you, Grandma. It's okay. I'll buy you anything, just tell me. Okay. I love you, Grandma.
Unaware of the truth, Cynthia is fond of Donna. On the other hand, when we go shopping and Cynthia wants sweets, I sometimes take them away from her. At such times, Cynthia would yell at me.
You're mean. You're nothing like Grandma.
Cynthia, I'm saying no because I'm worried about you. You'll get cavities if you eat too much.
But Grandma says it's okay. Stop comparing me to Grandma.
I raised my voice unintentionally. Cynthia started crying. Other customers looked over while talking. That night, Timothy came home furious.
How dare you make Cynthia cry? But I don't want to hear any excuses. From now on, Cynthia's care will be Mom's and my responsibility, so you don't have to do anything.
I was shocked by that order. I wondered if Timothy and Donna, who spoil Cynthia without doing anything, really believe they can take care of her. But Timothy's eyes were serious. Feeling overwhelmed, I nodded. However, Timothy's seriousness lasted only 3 days. Donna seemed not even to listen and did nothing as well. To think of it, I'm the one working. It's not fair for only you to live without doing anything. With that, he once again instructed me to take care of Cynthia. Despite the continuous unpleasantness, my work was going well. Is this really happening? While reading an email, I muttered to myself. A client, with whom I had corresponded a few times, had invited me to an exhibition. Excited, my cheeks flushed. I checked the email several times, savoring the fact that it was true. To hold an exhibition, I needed many paintings. There were repostings of past works, but the main content was still new creations. I started creating with more passion than ever before. I always worked late at night when my family was asleep. Even if my family didn't acknowledge me, there were people who appreciated my paintings. That alone made me feel like I could keep going no matter what. The exhibition was fast approaching next month. After delivering several new pieces, all that was left was to wait for the event. Tickets for the day of the event were sent to me. There were 3 tickets. It was a thoughtful gesture from the organizers for families. I was uncertain. Would Timothy come with me? Maybe the success of the exhibition could make him acknowledge my career as an illustrator. I decided to invite Timothy. Hey, Timothy. What? At that moment, Timothy was watching TV. A baseball game. It was a game featuring the player Timothy supports. Engrossed in the TV, Timothy said, "I'll be going out next month. I've got plans to drink with friends." Oh. Can't you make some time? Why should I? My work has been recognized, and there's an exhibition coming up. I was hoping you could come see it. Timothy silently watched the TV. Impatiently, I repeated, "It's my first exhibition. A regular and important client organized it, and there will be new paintings." What are you talking about? Finally, Timothy looked my way. His eyes were twisted in contempt. Don't drag me into your playtime. It's not play. The paintings on display might even sell. Your paintings? Nobody's going to buy them. Instead of wasting time on that, you should get a part-time job. Timothy shouted. He snatched the tickets from my hand. And then, he tore them up right in front of me. The pieces scattered at my feet. I stared at the pieces in a daze. I was speechless. Only tears overflowed. Picking up the pieces of the tickets, I thought to myself, Timothy will never understand my profession. I have never dismissed Timothy's hobbies. But Timothy would not allow me to have hobbies, nor to make them my job. I've reached my limit. I found myself glaring at Timothy. I can't take it anymore. I blurted out. Saying it out loud, I felt my resolve harden. I should leave Timothy. Honestly, divorce had always been on my mind. The divorce papers were kept in a drawer in my room. But every time I thought of handing them to Timothy, I remembered Cynthia. Cynthia needs both her parents. And if I took her and left the house, she would have to transfer schools. That's why I've been enduring it all this time. But that ends today. Hey, Jessica. Ignoring Timothy's call, I returned to my room. I gathered my things and filled out the divorce papers. This is it. Nodding to myself, I headed to Cynthia's room. Cynthia seemed to be doing her homework, sitting at her desk. Mom? I'm sorry, Cynthia. Seeing Cynthia's face, I was overwhelmed with guilt. I hugged Cynthia impulsively. Cynthia was surprised. Cynthia. I've decided to leave this house. Huh? Innocence faded from Cynthia's face. Feeling sorry for Cynthia yet continuing, I said,
"What do you want to do, Cynthia? Stay here with Dad or come with me?"
I thought she wouldn't come. Cynthia was fond of Donna, and I was always scolding her. With that thought and a wry smile, Cynthia surprised me.
"I'll go with you."
"Cynthia!"
"I love the paintings you make, Mom."
Saying that, Cynthia laughed. With a shy smile, she pointed to the desk. "I'm imitating you. I want to get good at drawing too."
"No, Cynthia, you're already good. You'll be better than me in no time."
I was tearing up. Cynthia had drawn a girl standing in a field of flowers. It was a theme I often enjoyed painting. I left the divorce papers on the living room table and left the house. Holding Cynthia's hand, we headed to my parents' house. Since I had explained the situation just before leaving, my parents welcomed us smoothly.
"To think Timothy was such a person. It must have been hard, Jessica."
"Yeah." Without a moment to rest, my mobile phone rang. It was Timothy calling. On the phone, Timothy was furious.
"Jessica, where's Cynthia?" "Cynthia is with me. And it's her choice, so it's not kidnapping."
Custody, no matter how much the parents argue, ultimately depends on the child's decision. I had read up on custody laws in preparation for the divorce, so I was informed. And Cynthia chose to stay with me. "Is that Dad?"
"Yes. Do you want to talk?"
"Yeah." I handed the mobile phone to Cynthia. Timothy's voice softened immediately.
"Cynthia, are you okay?"
"Yeah. Dad, I'm sorry. But I want to be with Mom."
"What are you saying? You'll be unhappy if you're with Mom. Come back."
"Dad, that's not true," Cynthia said quietly. I was surprised she had become so articulate.
"Mom has always tried hard. I saw. But you said terrible things about Mom's paintings and hurt her. Cynthia, I'm worried about Mom. So, I'm staying with her."
Saying that, Cynthia ended the call. She looked at me and laughed shyly again. I was stroking Cynthia's head. I thought I had no allies in that house. But Cynthia was watching. In the days that followed at my parents' house, calls and letters from Timothy kept coming. The content varied slightly, but the gist was the same: give back Cynthia.
"It's okay. You won't be handed over to that house." "Thanks, Mom."
I continued my work as an illustrator. Using a pen name unrelated to my real name, my communication with regular and important clients was unaffected. Unlike Brian and Donna, my parents are working. Cynthia was waiting at home for the school transfer procedures. Inevitably, I spent more time with Cynthia. Cynthia started asking me to teach her how to draw and help with her studies. I responded with a smile. There were household chores and my artwork. Yet, I couldn't neglect Cynthia, who chose to live with me. The day of the exhibition was drawing near. My father couldn't take us due to work, but I decided to go to the exhibition with my mother and Cynthia. Then one day,
"Coming."
Cynthia cheerfully ran to the corridor when the doorbell rang. But she stopped at the entrance and came back. In a frightened voice, Cynthia said,
"Mom, Dad's here."
I figured as much. I had thought he would come to visit eventually. I took a deep breath. I had no intention of letting Timothy into the house. I wouldn't even open the front door. I planned to have him leave immediately.
"What do you want?"
I asked in as cold a tone as possible. To my surprise, it was Timothy's response that startled me. "Jessica, please come back. I was wrong.
What do you mean?
I asked. His tone of voice was too desperate to be an act. Timothy said in a weak voice, Mom and Dad aren't doing anything. We've been living on fast food, and the laundry's been piling up since the day you left.
And?
It was as I had imagined. Timothy, who often worked outside, must be suffering. Since no one is preparing new clothes, he has to wear wrinkled clothes again. People at sales meetings pay close attention to one's clothes. With Timothy's current unkempt appearance, it would be difficult to get new businesses.
If this continues, our house will turn into a garbage dump. Do something about it. I thought I was the one who did nothing in that house.
I sighed.
Donna said I was a wife who didn't do household chores. You did too. I was wrong. Mom always claimed she did all the housework, and I believed it. I was deceived.
His tone made it seem as if he too were a victim, despite having bad-mouthed me together with Donna.
Don't you have any intention of doing the household chores yourself? I've never held a knife, nor do I know how to use the washing machine. Then don't rely on me for that.
Essentially, he wanted me to come back and take care of the piled-up household chores. That's a joke. I'm not returning to that house. The day I left the divorce papers behind was the day I abandoned all my love for Timothy. There's no way I could feel any sympathy for him now.
I'm not a housekeeper. Doing the household chores is a wife's duty.
Timothy's tone became rough. I, beyond being appalled, calmly responded.
I'm no longer your wife. I used to wake up early every morning to make your sandwiches. But I never heard a word of thanks from you, and it wasn't rare for you to leave them untouched, which disappointed me. I never failed to hang the laundry and iron them to prevent wrinkles. Do you understand? I was never thanked, yet I managed the household chores 365 days a year. So what? Every other wife lives like that. If there was gratitude, we could have been a normal couple.
The feeling that Timothy and I could not understand each other reemerged. Timothy didn't understand and didn't try to. He was only temporarily weak because he was in trouble. His essence hadn't changed at all.
I was grateful for you working. But that's over. I will live on my own strength. You should too, with your own effort. Hey, wait, Jessica.
Timothy was still saying something, but ignoring him, I went back to the living room. Timothy knocked on the door and rang the doorbell. But eventually, he must have given up and left. The exhibition was moderately successful. I walked around the venue holding Cynthia's hand. Mom, who came with us, pointed out a guest.
Isn't that Timothy? Huh.
I felt a chill. Facing Timothy directly, unlike through a door, was awkward. Cynthia would be concerned too. Yet, I looked at the guest's face. Though wearing a hat deeply, it was indeed Timothy.
Mom, please watch Cynthia. Okay.
I left Cynthia with Mom and approached Timothy. Trying not to bother other guests, I asked quietly,
What do you want?
You were really working as an artist. His tone was still listless. His clothes were wrinkled and gave off an unclean impression. Timothy's eyes flicked towards me briefly. But they're not selling, right?
Look over there.
I pointed to a corner of the venue. Displayed on the wall was a new piece of art. Marked as sold.
That painting caught the eye of a private collector, and it even got priced. Want to know how much?
No need. Timothy stepped back as if frightened. Seeing my paintings being commercially viable shocked him.
Excuse me, may I have a moment? Yes, how can I help you?
The person who approached was a local newspaper reporter. They wanted to feature the exhibition and include an interview with me in an article. For freelancers, marketing is crucial. You need to stand out among peers to make it as a profession. From that perspective, it was a welcome opportunity. Timothy was gaping.
You're that successful? Well, at least, my monthly income was higher than yours,
I said plainly. Timothy moaned in dismay. I had a rough idea. Timothy had always thought he was supporting the family alone with his income. The reality was different. In fact, Timothy's salary wasn't that high. It was only with my income that we could barely make ends meet. Regarding Brian and Donna, they had been demanding based on their pensions, but those pensions were meager. Honestly, the allowance I gave to Brian and Donna couldn't have come from their pensions. It was supplemented by my income. Jessica, you were an amazing person.
What are you saying now?
I started to walk away from Timothy. He tried to follow me.
Jessica, let's start over. You can draw as much as you like. I'll help with the household chores. So, please come back.
I didn't respond. The proposal was too convenient for Timothy alone, and I was dumbfounded by it. Besides, I shifted my gaze. He didn't seem to have the courage to speak to me directly, but I had felt their gaze on me for a while now. Indeed, it was Brian and Donna, now in tattered clothes. Brian and Donna were standing in front of my painting that had been marked as sold. They were looking back and forth between the sold sign and me, as if their eyes were about to pop out of their heads. They didn't even glance at my painting. They were just shocked by the fact that a painting could be turned into money.
Timothy, how did you get into the venue after you tore up the ticket?
I said I was the husband of the illustrator, and they let me in. Ex-husband. My dismay deepened. By tearing up the ticket, Timothy had cut himself off from any benefits of my art. From now on, he had to live on his income and the proud pensions of Brian and Donna.
Excuse me, this work is really wonderful. Thank you.
A customer complimented me, and another one of my paintings sold right there. Timothy, Brian, and Donna watched the scene in disbelief. The next day, Timothy's calls became more intense. What's happened to Dad?
Yes. What a pickle.
The effort to bring me back was unprecedented. After some thought, I reported Timothy as a stalker to the police. Although Timothy must have received a warning, his continued phone calls and stalking behaviors eventually got him in trouble with the police.
Me? A stalker? That's ridiculous. I'm her husband.
He claimed, but the divorce was already finalized, rendering his protests meaningless. Faced with their son causing a police matter, Brian and Donna also left Timothy's side as if fleeing, likely followed by bad rumors wherever they went.
My profession was not recognized by my family. That must have been tough.
During the interview, I shared the pain of not being acknowledged for my work by Brian, Donna, and Timothy. The emerging creator is a tragic heroine, overcoming adversity to continue her work. That was the headline. I looked at the article as if it were about someone else. Tragic heroine sounded too sweet. It was tough. But now, it's different. I have Cynthia. I have my parents. And I have the voices of fans who need my work. Timothy. The ticket you denied had this much power. Though it was a local paper, the article improved my recognition as an artist. Work started coming in more than before, and I could support Cynthia on my single income. Staying with my parents indefinitely felt uncomfortable. I decided to rent an apartment with Cynthia, choosing a place as close as possible to her new school. My parents seemed regretful.
You're always welcome to stay here.
Yes, Jessica, you've been through a lot at that house. Thank you. But it's my life, I said as if to convince myself. The disgrace of depending on someone was something Timothy, Brian, and Donna had taught me. I would live taking them as a negative example. Cynthia brought friends home. She seemed to be managing somehow at her new school. Despite the inconvenience caused by her parents, Cynthia didn't use it as an excuse and lived positively.
Mom draws pictures.
Wow, that's cool. Since moving, Cynthia's speech had matured somewhat. She started practicing drawing seriously. Until then, she would whimsically draw girls in her free notebook, but she began showing interest in the equipment I used for work, spending more time watching me work.
I'm going to be like you, Mom.
Really?
I'm glad. Then, want to try using this pen? Can I?
Cynthia's cheeks flushed with excitement. It reminded me of myself when I got new notebooks or paints, and I smiled. Cynthia and I, we truly are mother and daughter. At first, Cynthia couldn't draw straight lines. Trying to draw, her lines would warp into squiggly blobs. But after many attempts, Cynthia's lines began to form into pictures. Her work with paints and colored pencils showed signs of improvement. Apparently, she's among the better artists in her class.
Mom! Look! My teacher praised this picture.
Really?
Let me see.
I was thrilled. It's my daughter's growth. There's no way I wouldn't be happy. I had only taught Cynthia the very basics. How to break down the human body into parts for easier drawing and the relationship between light sources and shadows. Other than that, Cynthia must have learned by watching my work and completed paintings.
Cynthia might be more talented than me.
I genuinely thought so, without exaggeration. Cynthia smiled shyly. I will continue to draw. For Cynthia. For my fans. And most of all, for myself, who never gave up on drawing no matter the circumstances.
Impossible! William, that can't be done.
Switch the medicine with that. I only heard a whisper, but it was unmistakably William's voice. I'm sorry, Linda. Actually. The next day, Mary confessed something to me. I was shocked and at the same time, resolved. I must protect Mary at all costs. And William, I will never forgive you. My name is Linda. A 55-year-old housewife. Recently, my only son John got married, and I felt at ease. My husband William and I are the same age.
Guess we need to start thinking about our retirement, huh?
We would laugh about it. John used to live alone in an apartment about a 5-minute drive from our house. It was a studio apartment. So, after getting married, the newlyweds moved to a bigger apartment. Their new place was even closer to us, just a 10-minute walk away. William and I thought, it's comforting to have John so close. But I felt a bit uneasy. Being so close to the house means we need to be careful not to overstep boundaries. I was warned by a friend before. At this age, most of my friends have become mother-in-laws just like me. And from them, I got various pieces of advice. The most shocking was about sons' wives.
People have two sides. Just because she smiles in front of you doesn't mean she's happy.
My friend said in a serious voice. In essence, don't be fooled by the superficial smiles of sons' wives. No one wants to doubt the smiling face of their son's wife. But my friend's words were convincing. In fact, this friend got along well with her daughter-in-law, meeting up frequently. She was like a real daughter to me. She'd often say. However, it turned out the daughter-in-law had been forcing herself to accommodate herself to her mother-in-law. One day, her pent-up frustrations exploded and she got angry. They almost broke off their relationship, but somehow they managed to calm things down. At the end of the day, we're strangers. A proper distance is crucial. I remember the tired sigh and the lonely look on my friend's face. Mary, who married John, is a really nice girl. Always smiling and great at listening to others. Truly adorable. I wondered how such a nice girl ended up marrying John. When I visited the apartment, Mary greeted me with a smile. Furthermore,
Feel free to visit anytime,
she said. I want to believe there's no lie in her words or smile. But taking everything she says at face value and imposing could be dangerous. To get along with a son's wife, such caution is necessary. By being cautious, we maintained a good relationship. We meet only when invited by the couple. We also refrain from contacting them unless necessary. It feels a bit lonely, but thanks to this, we've been able to get along without any issues. However, one day, when my son and his wife came to visit, they made a surprising request.
Excuse me? What did you say?
I asked again, and John repeated the same words. That's right, I've been assigned to work overseas, so we want Mary to stay here with you. John had been on business trips abroad before. But this was his first long-term assignment. Upon asking, it turns out the duration is at least 2 years. And it might extend beyond that.
2 years? Is it okay for a couple to be apart for so long? Wouldn't it be better for Mary to go with you?
Mary has her job, and I'll be busy abroad. It's safer for her to live with you guys than alone in a foreign country. John looked to Mary for consent, and Mary nodded with a smile.
Really? We don't mind, but
if we can support our son and his wife, that would be wonderful. But, is this really what Mary wants? Living with us, the in-laws, might be less comfortable for her than following John abroad. If Mary's parents were around, maybe she could have relied on them, but both of Mary's parents have passed away.
But why can't she just live on her own? The apartment is close, and of course, we'd be happy to help if anything happens. There's no need to live together unnecessarily.
Thinking it would be better for Mary, I suggested this to the couple. But, for some reason,
that won't work,
Mary immediately said.
Mary has some bad memories from the past, and she can't live alone.
Mary nodded.
Is that so? I'm sorry for not knowing.
No, it's fine. Then, living together might be the only option. At that moment, William, who had been silently observing, said, If that's the case, she should stay with us. There's no need to hesitate. Mary is our daughter now. William smiled at the couple. Besides, he added, I often come home late from work. It'd be better for Linda to have Mary around than to be alone. True, William doesn't start work early, but he often comes home late. It's reassuring not to be alone at such times. Yes, if Mary is okay with it, let's live together happily. Indeed, there are benefits to living together. Not only drawbacks. And unlike me, a housewife, Mary has a job. We won't always be together. Maybe we could make it work.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Us too. And so, Mary began living with us. I was nervous about living together, but Mary was indeed a good person.
Linda, good morning. Would you like to join me for breakfast?
When I woke up, there were delicious-looking scrambled eggs, sausages, and soup on the table. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to have someone cook for me, it's never happened before. But, it must have been a lot of work. No, I was making some for myself anyway. I hope it's good.
Let's eat. Yes, it's delicious.
I'm glad. Mary has a job, so I did most of the housework. But Mary never dumped everything on me. Instead, she actively helped with the chores. John really has an eye for people. Marrying someone as wonderful as Mary, he's a lucky guy. I looked to William for confirmation. Indeed. And he smiled. Living together seemed problem-free. However, about a month into our living together, I noticed a change in Mary. She still did housework between her job duties but started to stay in her room unusually often. After meals, she'd head straight to her room and not come out until morning. Even in the morning, she used to have breakfast with us, but now she'd leave for work before we even woke up.
Did I do something to make her dislike me? It's lonely.
I told this to William, who returned home late. Are you thinking too much? Mary might just want some alone time.
That may be true, but I feel like she's avoiding us.
Living together with us. Mary has to be considerate of us every day. Maybe she's tired of it. As I pondered, William patted my shoulder. Don't be too anxious. It's bad for your health. Don't fall sick again. I had previously been hospitalized for a stroke. Remembering that, William looked worried and stroked my back.
I'm fine. I'm taking my medication properly. But maybe I am overthinking it.
After that, Mary avoided me even more, but I tried not to mind it. Weekdays were okay, but weekends were hard. On weekends, William would go out alone. So, I often went out with Mary. Even if we didn't go out, we chatted at home while eating snacks and spending time together. But recently, Mary would refuse even if I invited her. Moreover, she started going out every weekend. Are you going out now? I casually asked Mary as she was heading to the entrance. Mary looked puzzled and said, "This has nothing to do with you. Please leave me alone." Then Mary hurried out of the house. I understood she was rejecting me. Having been close at first, I was more shocked than I imagined. Since then, I've also started avoiding Mary somehow. Will things stay this way until John returns from abroad? Maybe it would be better for both of us to stop living together now. I wanted to talk to William, but, as luck would have it, he was not around. William had been away on a business trip for 2 weeks. The weekends were painful for me, so I tried to go out as much as possible. I didn't want to run into Mary. When I got home, I could hear Mary's voice coming from her room. It sounded like she was talking to someone. Since Mary wouldn't invite guests over without telling me, she must be on the phone. "I'm home." I called out and approached her room. As I was about to quietly open the door, I realized Mary was on a call. She was indeed on the phone. Convinced, I thought not to disturb her call and was about to leave. When Mary raised her voice.
"It's impossible, William. I can't do that."
I definitely heard William's name. William was supposed to be on a business trip. It seemed unlikely he would contact Mary from there. Yet, I heard Mary continue.
"William, that's why I can't."
I heard Mary say. I approached Mary's room again, trying to listen. I could hear Mary's voice, but not the person on the other end. I couldn't tell if it was William nor understand the conversation. Feeling frustrated, I couldn't leave or interrupt. I just stood there. Meanwhile, Mary seemed troubled on the phone. Repeatedly saying,
"That's why it's impossible,"
she said over and over. Was William asking her for something? Maybe I should help. But she'll find out I was eavesdropping. It might worsen our already strained relationship. Yet, it's sad to think our relationship could get any worse. As I was pondering this, Mary cried out in distress. Almost simultaneously, I heard something fall. Soon after, William's low voice filled the room. "Switch the medicine with that." Perhaps Mary dropped her smartphone, causing it to switch to speaker mode. Mary must have quickly picked up the phone and switched it off speaker because William's voice disappeared, and only Mary's voice was audible again. After that, "I understand," Mary said, then fell silent. She must have ended the call. I took a deep breath, quietly returned to the entrance. And after composing myself, "I'm home," I called out to Mary again. "Ah, welcome back." Mary came out of her room, her face tense. There was no way I could question her about the phone call. Mary went back to her room with a troubled look. Who was William talking about? Most of all, the words about switching the medication with that stayed in my mind. I thought about asking Mary several times but didn't have the courage to do so. Had William and Mary been in contact without my knowledge all this time? William's tone during that moment was far from his usual demeanor. Such a commanding tone, not just towards Mary, but he wouldn't even use it with me. What if Mary was betraying me? Or what if William was threatening Mary? I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, rubbing my sleepy eyes, I was drinking water in the kitchen when Mary woke up.
Good morning, Mary.
My voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. But Mary's voice sounded even less energetic.
Good morning,
she said, looking down, in a barely audible voice.
Mary, you seem down. What's wrong?
Could it be related to yesterday's phone call? Concerned, I looked at Mary and was shocked. Mary's eyes were swollen. Her cheeks were wet with tears, and tears were still overflowing from her eyes.
Mary, what's wrong? Are you okay?
Instinctively grabbing her hand, Mary grasped mine back. I'm sorry, Linda. Actually. Mary then explained something to me while crying. It was unbelievably shocking. I didn't know how to react after hearing everything. Stunned by Mary's sudden confession, my mind went blank. Mary cried in front of me again. I'm sorry. Linda, I'm sorry. Mary kept apologizing. I hugged Mary.
What are you talking about? It's all William's fault, not yours.
I tried to soothe her, but Mary's tears wouldn't stop. Hoping to calm her down, I gently stroked her back. I'm sorry. It's my fault for keeping silent.
It's not your fault. Everyone has things they can't share. Besides, if John is okay with it, then neither William nor I should interfere in a couple's matters.
Saying this out loud helped her cool down gradually. And then, anger towards William started to rise. How many years has it been since William and I got married? We've had our fights and even discussed separation. But I had always intended to spend the rest of my life with William. Never did I imagine he would be plotting such things behind my back. After a while, when Mary seemed to have calmed down, we decided to discuss what to do next. First, we should contact John before William returns from his business trip. For Mary, she thought,
I don't want to interfere with his work.
But that's not right.
He would consider you more important than his job. How would John feel if he found out you've been struggling like this?
After hearing this, Mary silently agreed. We tried contacting John, but couldn't reach him. Maybe he was busy with work or asleep. We decided to leave a message summarizing the situation and asking him to call us when he has time. 2 days later, William returned from his business trip. I'm exhausted, he repeated, handing me his bag and jacket. I took them, saying, Welcome back, without really meaning it. Entering the living room, William looked around. What's wrong? I asked, and William replied, Just wondering where Mary is. Scanning the room again. Oh, I sent her out for some shopping. Did you need her for something? I said with a forced smile, and William replied, No, not really. Averting his gaze. While William showered, I prepared the documents on the table. The thought of showing them to William filled me with mixed emotions. After decades of marriage, I never wanted to use such papers. But knowing the truth, I could no longer envision a future with him. William came out of the shower, looking satisfied, and sat down with a towel around his neck. Normally, he would finish off a beer already set out for him. But noticing the absence of beer, he squinted at me questioningly. Hey, where's the beer? There's no beer today. Look at this instead, I urged, and William, looking at the papers on the table, was shocked. What's this? He said angrily, staring at the table. I clenched my fist and said, These are divorce papers. Please, let's get divorced. Huh? William shifted his gaze from the divorce papers to me. Divorce? Why? I sensed more anger than confusion in William's voice and expression.
Why does someone like me have to be told by you to divorce?
I can almost hear him saying that.
It seems like you wanted a divorce, right?
William looked surprised.
No, I never, that.
I couldn't help but laugh.
What's so funny? Because you're so flustered.
Oh right, you didn't want a divorce, you wanted to remarry. William remained silent, looking troubled.
That, I
know everything.
Your affair with another woman, trying to make me take medication to be with her, and what I can't forgive the most is that you threatened Mary.
William turned pale and started to sweat. With that face.
It's not true, that's not it.
He kept repeating excuses.
Whatever you say is pointless. I heard everything from Mary. Mary, that bastard.
Mary had debts before getting married. It seems William found out when she was talking to John about it on the phone. The reason she couldn't live alone was because she wanted to use the rent money to repay the debt. Knowing she had no money, William must have thought he had the upper hand. He had Mary doing menial tasks behind my back. Mary, afraid of being thrown out, couldn't stand up to William. Apparently, Mary was keeping an eye on William every time she had a day off to break free from him. That's when she witnessed William cheating. When she confronted him,
Linda will be the one who's sad.
He brazenly responded. And then, brazenly, since it was out in the open, William ordered Mary to switch my medication.
So, you thought of getting rid of me because I was in your way?
Yes, shockingly, the person William was talking about over the phone was me. Having had a stroke before, there's a medication I must take daily. Without it, I'm prone to blood clots, and unluckily, it could be fatal. William was planning to swap my medication with something else.
Of all things, to swap it with a vitamin pill, huh?
For most people, it's just a supplement, but for me, it's poison. Depending on the type of vitamin, it could increase the risk of blood clots. In other words, William was after my life.
Anyway, I can no longer stay with you. Please, let's get a divorce. We'll discuss the money for the divorce proceedings through a lawyer later.
William looked frustrated and then turned his gaze to Mary, who returned.
Mary, how dare you do this? You know what will happen, right?
Mary showed a momentary look of fear, but when I took her hand, she glared back at William. I know. It's okay now. I have Linda.
What? Getting cocky, aren't you?
William seemed ready to pounce at any moment. But just then, there was a noise from the entrance, and John appeared.
Are you okay?
John stood in front of William, shielding Mary.
John, why are you here? I got a call from Mom and rushed back from overseas.
Dad, I'm disappointed. What have you done?
At first, I just wanted to exploit a weakness and leave. But then, I needed money.
Either way, it's despicable.
I don't want to see your face anymore.
Just leave. Wait. Are you okay with this, Linda?
Saying such things. You're a housewife without an income. You won't be able to live. Don't worry. I'll get the money for the divorce proceedings from you. Besides, this house was inherited from my parents, so don't act so high and mighty.
William was still saying something so arrogant, but
I'll call the police,
I said, and he left. Afterward, William and I divorced. William had been secretly supporting his mistress, and some savings had been spent. I feel like I understand why he needed money. As a substitute for the money for the divorce proceedings, I took all his remaining savings. William's life from here on is on zero savings. Relationships broken off by his son, it's going to be quite hard. Whether his mistress will stick with him through this kind of life is questionable, but I couldn't care less. John went back to work the day after everything was settled. Mary and I are still living together. I repaid Mary's debts with the money I got from William. My son and his wife wanted to repay it themselves, but considering the interest rate, it seemed wasteful. Since it was William's money anyway, I wanted to use it up quickly. The regular meals between my son's wife and I are now my greatest joy. We want to keep getting along well until John returns home.
I want a divorce.
Fine, but I'm not paying any alimony in a divorce trial, you know? You don't work, so you must not have any money. Are you okay with that? More than money, protecting my own happiness is much more important. I don't want to stay in this house, nor do I want to live with this man. I'll definitely divorce and make you regret it. My name is Carolina. I was born and raised in the countryside, 58 years old, and picking mountain vegetables becomes my hobby when the weather gets warm. I love the peaceful countryside air, but there was a time in my life when I resented being from the countryside. Back then, I was in my 20s. After graduating high school, I got a job at a local department store, a position only offered to top students. I believe I lived a more glamorous life than others my age. Then one day, my boss said,
"A VIP customer is coming."
And I was assigned to assist a certain individual. That was my husband, Louis. Louis's family had produced a member of parliament, and even though Louis's direct family wasn't in politics, they were a well-known local business family. As the eldest son, Louis was set to inherit the family business and had significant influence locally. However, in the larger scope, their business was just one of many competitors. In the city, they would probably be overshadowed. Yet, in our area, Louis was something like a local king. But it was this assignment in the store that led to Louis taking a fancy to me. People around me said things like,
"Marrying a rich man, you're so lucky, your future is secure." But I wasn't happy at all.
Louis's family, the Warners, had a lot of bad rumors because of their influence locally. Arrogant, quick to fire employees they didn't like, secretly dating several pretty female employees. How much of it was true, I, a recent high school graduate, couldn't tell. But where there's smoke, there's fire. There must be some truth to the issues they faced. Louis's approach was persistent, no, passionate, and he often waited in his car outside my workplace until I finished work. He gave me bouquets, treated me to dinners at fancy restaurants, various ways of showing his affection. However, as I talked more with Louis, I started to think. Despite all the rumors about his family, maybe he's a serious and good person? So, I started dating him, and eventually, we got married. Right after our marriage, my in-laws gifted us a house. They said it was a wedding present. I was used to more modest wedding gifts, so it surprised me. Louis accepted it as if it were normal. I realized then that we lived in different worlds. I never imagined that this house would turn out to be akin to a devil's dwelling. After moving in with Louis, his mother, Catherine, started visiting our home frequently. Mostly without a specific reason, I just had to listen to her complaints about my father-in-law, Hector, all day. Apparently, Catherine had many issues with Hector. He doesn't pay attention to her, isn't grateful, even the argument they had 10 years ago. There's no end to Catherine's unpleasant stories. Not only about Hector but also about the family driver's way of speaking, the attitude of the company secretary, even the neighbor's clothing. She found something to complain about in everything. It was stressful having to listen to these stories every time.
Even it would be still acceptable if you're helping with a family business. It's a disgrace to work outside as a Warner family daughter-in-law.
As she said so, I had quit my job at the department store after getting married, so I had no way to avoid her frequent visits. Initially, she visited mostly on weekdays when Louis was away, but gradually she started coming over on weekends too. That probably wasn't good. Even though we were newlyweds, Louis began spending more time away from home. Catherine doted on him. Regarding our marriage, she had said,
"I wouldn't have allowed it if she wasn't a woman I approved of."
And there were quite strict conditions for a marriage partner. I wasn't highly educated, from a good family, or skilled in household chores as she wanted, but my ordinary face and knowing my place were preferred. A son's wife shouldn't be opinionated, always walk behind the men of the Warner family, it seems. Perhaps because I wasn't too flashy, my ordinary face was favored. My demeanor. I was just scared to speak with someone from a powerful family, but they took it as knowing my place. Thanks to that, now I can't say, Catherine, I've heard this complaint from you before. Half a year into the marriage, Louis hardly came home, and I started to wonder if I married him or Catherine. Then, his affair was discovered. One night, when he returned home in a company car, I accidentally witnessed from the window him kissing a woman in the back seat before parting ways. The driver didn't seem particularly flustered. As soon as they finished their exchange, the driver smoothly drove off, as if accustomed to their affairs.
Hey! What was that just now?
Naturally, I confronted Louis, who entered the house with a calm face. I couldn't forgive infidelity less than a year into our marriage, especially after such a passionate pursuit before marriage. However, his reaction was completely different from what I expected.
Don't make a fuss over one or two women.
Instead, prepare dinner. I was speechless at his attitude, untying his tie and heading to the living room. He wasn't even trying to hide it, but rather being defiant.
Wait. Explain. Who was that woman?
You're noisy.
She's a woman from the company.
A new employee, I'm just looking after her.
You're a high-ranking official. You're not in a position to look after new employees. What kind of care are you providing?
Enough, I'm tired. Be quiet. With that, he forcefully shook off my hand. I was pushed hard on the shoulder and fell to the floor.
Calm down.
I'm displeased, I'm taking a shower. Leaving me with a cold gaze, he really went to take a shower. The sound of the shower echoing in the room felt emptily surreal, and I deeply regretted marrying such a person. The next day, Catherine, as usual, came to our house and spoke to me in a clearly bad mood.
Carolina, sit down there.
What? Confused, I was forcibly pushed to the floor by the secretary who entered the room with her.
What is this about?
You yelled at Louis yesterday, who was tired from work, didn't you?
Is that what a wife does? How do you know that? But that's because I saw him kissing a woman in front of the house. It's natural to ask what that was about.
I was told by him to warn you. Honestly.
As a Warner family woman, you should turn a blind eye to one or two outside women. Are you saying I should tolerate infidelity and pretend not to see it? Great men in the past had many women. That's what it means to have power.
I can't accept this. This family is really strange.
That's it. I'm divorcing Louis.
Saying it out loud made me tear up for the first time. Despite everything, I did love Louis. I never imagined choosing to leave him in such a manner on our wedding day, but...
There's no way I'll allow that. What nonsense are you talking about?
I involuntarily shrank back at Catherine's furious demeanor. After a heavy sigh, Catherine took out her mobile phone and made a call to somewhere.
Hi, yes, sorry Hector. Could you come home for a moment? Is it okay now?
Yes, understood. As soon as she hung up the phone, she glared at me and said, "We're going to our house." Despite my resistance, I was forcibly dragged by the secretary, put in a car, and taken to my in-laws' house. Or more precisely, to the barn of my in-laws' house. Shortly after our arrival, Hector, father-in-law, also appeared. It seems he was the one Catherine had called earlier.
Carolina, you said you wanted a divorce?
Hector sneered at me.
Yes. I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. We can't have a scandal of a Warner family man being left by his wife. I don't care about that.
Just as I tried to argue back, he grabbed my hair.
Listen, what I and Louis say is absolute. You have no right to refuse. Understand that until you calm down.
Saying this, he roughly let go of my hair, and I staggered backward.
Let's go.
Hector commanded.
Just do your duty.
Catherine left these words behind and walked out of the barn with Hector. Hearing the sound of the key, I realized I was locked in. Panicking, I banged on the door and screamed to be let out, but someone who seemed to be the secretary said through the door,
"I'm afraid that's not possible."
and then ignored me completely. 12 hours later, locked in the hot and humid barn, I was on the verge of dehydration when I was finally released. Exhausted, Catherine asked me, "Have you calmed down?" and handed me a bottle of water. Drinking the water hastily made me feel sick, and I was too exhausted to think. Far from calming down, I couldn't think of anything. Led by Catherine into the house, I saw Louis and a woman next to him. "Have you reflected?" "Carolina. I'm willing to forgive you if you have. I still like you." Seeing his smiling face made my spine chill. "No, I can't have a conversation with this person. And, starting today, this lady will live with us too. This is Lisa. Get along." Looking at the woman, I vaguely remembered the scene. This woman was the one he was kissing.
What are you thinking? Why do I have to live with your affair partner?
Hey, are you saying you have a problem with that?
Of course I do. This is weird, this house is wrong, not just you, Catherine and Hector too, everyone.
The atmosphere in the room froze with my words. But I didn't think I was wrong at all.
How dare you? To disrespect not just Louis but Hector too.
Catherine's anger was calmed by Louis saying, "It's okay."
You said you wanted a divorce? Do you know what will happen to you and your family if you divorce?
His cold gaze met my defiant stare.
I'll take you up on that, let's get divorced. Fine, but I won't pay any alimony in a divorce trial, you know?
You don't work, so you must not have any money. Are you okay with that? Louis smiled creepily. He thinks threatening me with money will make me return. It must have always been like this.
Even so, please divorce me.
As I answered, Louis sighed and instructed Lisa.
Take the paper in the back right of that drawer.
Lisa stood up, took a paper from the drawer as instructed, and handed it to him.
Here. Dad said to threaten women with this when necessary. My part is already filled out. Use it as you like.
The paper handed to me was a signed divorce application, just as he said. Good, I'll proceed with this immediately and cut ties with this house.
If you regret it, it's not my problem.
He said, to which I replied firmly.
I won't regret it, I'm sure.
Dragging my weakened body, I headed to the courthouse. Wait.
With such a dirty look, even if you're pretending to be someone else, if a woman from the Warner family is seen walking outside at night, it'll be a shame, so use our car.
I'll provide a driver for you. Hector's words made me visibly frown. Are they planning to lock me in the car and take me somewhere? Then, at that moment, the secretary, Casey,
I'll do it,
raised her hand to volunteer. She had been accompanying me on shopping trips ever since I got married. He then ordered Casey. Then you go. Trusting Casey, I got into the car and submitted the divorce papers. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Louis. The first thing, he shouted.
Don't mess around.
What's the matter? All of a sudden.
Don't play dumb. You're the culprit. Because of you, we're losing business partners. What are you going to do about it? That's exactly what I wanted. I'm glad to hear that.
Irritated by my laughter.
I'll destroy your family's home,
shouted Louis. Actually, when I submitted the divorce papers.
Please use this.
Casey handed me a pen in the car. Inside it was footage of me being lectured by Catherine about Louis's infidelity, being forcibly taken to the car by a male secretary, and then locked in the barn. It also included the moment Louis said he wanted to live with his mistress. Casey's sister was almost forced to become Hector's mistress and was fired from the group company when she refused. Casey and her sister had different last names due to their parents' divorce, so no one realized they were sisters. She had been waiting for a chance for revenge. Always carrying a pen-shaped mini-camera in her breast pocket just in case.
Your treatment by Carolina was too harsh. I like you because you're kind and always thank the secretary. This should keep your family safe. Feel free to use it as you wish. Please take it with you,
she said, entrusting me with the data. With this perfect material, I contacted a friend who worked at a publishing house to expose the reality of that house. I had planned to do this after the divorce anyway, but I was thankful to have evidence of the terrible treatment I received. I sold the data to a magazine, and the ruthless reality of the family was spread not only in magazines and newspapers but also on social media. Considering they were a family that had produced a member of parliament, even though they weren't a major corporate representative, the scandalous nature of the story attracted public attention as expected.
Basically, you exposing dad and mom's affair. What do you want to do?
I'm exposing all the misdeeds of your family. If there's any power left in your family, I would have been completely destroyed along with my family, right? I just took up arms to protect my family. Got a problem with that? I had heard from Catherine's complaints every day that she actually has a lover. Initially, it started with Hector's infidelity, and as revenge, Catherine also cheated. Catherine, at 68 years old, had a lover in his 20s. She was quite smitten, apparently showering him with gifts. Catherine said, "If it weren't for the ties to this house, we would have been married long ago." But frankly, to the lover, Catherine was probably just a wallet. Catherine's history of affairs wasn't just with this man. Apparently, there were many others in the past. While she claimed it was revenge against Hector, Catherine seemed to enjoy it just as much. It was mutual.
Because of you, Dad is even saying he'll divorce Mom. It's your fault.
I thought Warner family members weren't allowed to divorce. If your dad can't endure it anymore and easily changes his opinion, that's pretty small-minded.
Shut up. The person who caused this shouldn't be acting so high and mighty.
The cause, don't make me laugh. It's your parents who messed up with their constant affairs, and you for cheating, leading to our divorce.
What will you do if this house falls apart? I'm the only one inheriting this house and company. If it continues like this, I'll lose everything.
Louis's voice gradually turned to tears. It's his fault, so I wish he wouldn't cry so pathetically. Duh. If you care so much about your family and company, why not just pull yourself together and rebuild them if they collapse? Don't you have any thoughts of starting over? It's unattractive to be unable to do anything unless you're at an advantage from the start.
Shut up. A commoner like you couldn't possibly understand what it feels like for me, who has been burdened with the expectations of being an heir since childhood, to have my promised future taken away.
Do you really think you were the only one expected to be an heir?
Of course.
Well, yes, you're the only decent son.
What do you mean? I'm an only child, you know that.
No, you have an older half-brother with a different father.
What? Don't lie. What are you talking about?
After our divorce, I hired a private detective who was an acquaintance of my parents. Your family is so well known that I didn't even need a detective to find all sorts of information.
An older brother for me? Don't joke. I've never heard such a thing.
As he was infuriated, I patiently explained to him about the existence of his brother. But it's true. Your family's former housekeeper, Joanne, you know her, right? Hector had a child with her. He was speechless at my words. Joanne, she. He was clearly interested in the familiar name I mentioned over the phone. Well, he never acknowledged the child legally because my legal wife doesn't have children yet. Catherine, who was newly married at the time, was very against it. Catherine had you, but Hector preferred Joanne's child, whom he had first. He even told people he wanted that child to inherit the family business. Eventually, that didn't happen, and reluctantly you were born as the heir. Your family is like a drama, really. At this point, Louis whispered, "That can't be true," in a small voice. But unlike before, his tone conveyed that he didn't think my story was false. Now, here's the question.
Huh?
Louis reacted with an obviously displeased voice when I suddenly started joking. Who really carries the blood of the Warner family?
What do you mean?
You are the child of Catherine's affair.
What?
When she found out about Joanne's pregnancy, she got back at Hector by getting pregnant with a man who was a driver at the time. That child was you.
That's impossible.
It's true, Hector didn't notice, but my investigation found people who knew about Catherine and your real father at the time.
No. That's a lie. I'm the only heir to this house. Otherwise, what was all my effort for?
Louis wailed like a child throwing a tantrum. That's why the real heir is Joanne's child. Not a drop of Hector's blood in you. If you doubt it, do a DNA test yourself. Well, it will be interesting to see what you, a stranger by blood, will do with that irredeemable house from now on. Good luck, bye-bye. I couldn't hide my smile as I cheerfully said goodbye to him and hung up the phone. Louis must have been shocked, he stayed silent. Then, my leak sparked other magazines to talk about Louis's family scandal. It was revealed that Louis was not of the Warner blood, Hector's tax evasion, and Catherine's verbal abuse to the driver. My plan worked faster than I thought. Louis's family fell into decline, closing all their businesses. Locally known as the no-good family, they fled the town and dispersed, now living modestly. While the relatives live modestly, Louis struggles to find a job due to his widespread exposure in magazines. He tried to command his former subordinates to find him work, but no one listens to a powerless Louis. His actions ended up in magazines, leaving him unemployed. Hector and Catherine divorced, entangled in disputes over alimony from the divorce. It was an ugly family till the end. As for me, I asked to be rehired at the department store where I worked before marriage. After that, I focused on my career, advancing smoothly. When I reached a certain age, I attended a middle school reunion and met a classmate attending for the first time in his 40s. He was not good at socializing and a man of few words. But his unpretentiousness was exactly what I found appealing and trustworthy. Thanks to that, my second marriage is going very well. The first marriage was full of struggles, but because of that, I learned to be discerning. Being single for a while allowed me to meet my current husband. In a way, my life hasn't been a waste. I even feel a little grateful to Louis. That's how I feel now.
I gave your dead ex-husband's life insurance money to my eldest son's wife for her housewarming. What's yours is mine, so you shouldn't have any complaints.
Divorce? Understood. I guess he thought I would cry and refuse the divorce, because my husband seemed a bit surprised. Don't think everything will go your way. Just you watch. My name is Jennifer. I am actually remarried to my current husband, David. I was widowed from my previous husband, William, due to illness. William had a disease since his youth, which worsened and led to his death. Concerned about me being left alone, William left me a substantial amount of life insurance. I had no children with William. I met David through a relative's introduction. When I tried to refuse him, saying I wasn't a first-time bride,
"Don't worry about that,"
he said. I felt happy, as it seemed he accepted not just me but also William. Since remarrying David, due to my frail health and David's high income, I've been a housewife. I gave birth to our daughter Susan and our son Anthony, and I've tried my best with housework and child-rearing. David sometimes brought home stress from work, behaving selfishly and yelling suddenly, but I managed to get by. When David was in a bad mood, moocher, nuisance, he would call me things like that. But I am grateful to David for providing a financially comfortable life. David treated our son Anthony specially as the heir to the house. For Susan and Anthony's birthday and Christmas gifts, school entrance gifts, and other occasions, he clearly favored one over the other. During long vacations in summer, he would take Anthony to his parents' house and not return him for days. At David's parents' house, Anthony could eat sweets and play games all he wanted, messing up his daily rhythm and study habits. When he returned, he would rebel and look down on me, making it very difficult to return to our normal life. I appealed many times to stop this, as it wasn't good for Anthony, but
I took in a woman with a marriage history. A wife shouldn't talk back,
he said, and never accepted it. Susan disliked David and his family's home and left the house early. Susan got married about 5 years ago. She has children and is struggling with childcare. Anthony got married about 2 years ago. His wife was young and beautiful. I often had trouble with Anthony's wife, Nancy's attitude, but we didn't meet often, and I thought maybe that's just how young people are these days, so I didn't interfere much. Now, this happened about 2 years ago. When Anthony and Nancy had dinner at our house to celebrate their marriage, Nancy said as soon as she arrived,
"Wow, what a lovely house. Anthony grew up here? I'm so jealous. David, you're so successful, how impressive." "Well, my wife is useless and can't work, so I had to work hard alone. But I guess this house is getting a bit old, just like my wife. How unpleasant, houses and women shouldn't be old. Women should be young and cute like you, Nancy. Nancy, you work, right? That's commendable. In this day and age, capable women need to work and live in society. Unlike my useless wife."
David was smitten with the attractive Nancy and insulted me unnecessarily. This house is old, but I keep it well organized and clean. Perhaps because of David's groundless accusations, Nancy seems to think it's okay to look down on me just because I'm older. She even directed her condescending gaze at my eldest daughter, Susan.
"Susan is just like Jennifer, huh? I think you should take care of your nails and wear some accessories. Have you given up just because you have kids? I won't become like Susan after marriage, Anthony, don't worry."
Of course, you're different from Mom and Susan. They're so different, it's like they're not even the same species. Nancy acts superior and out of line towards Susan, who is struggling with childcare every day, but neither David nor Anthony seem to notice how ridiculous it is. After the dinner, when Anthony and Nancy left, Susan said in a dismayed voice, "Her attitude is questionable, isn't it? Honestly, I don't want to be involved." Regarding this, David said, "Susan, are you angry because she hit the nail on the head?" Women's jealousy is ugly," he said dismissively. Susan, looking truly disgusted, said, "Dad, you need to look at things more calmly or you might lose your way.
A woman shouldn't speak so arrogantly. You always say such presumptuous things, Susan. Just go home."
David, upset, locked himself in his room. "Mom, if you have any troubles or concerns, please consult me right away. I'm kinda worried about you." Susan left after saying that. One day, Susan invited me to a cafe in the neighborhood. Ever since that incident, Susan has been inviting me out more often, maybe to check if I'm all right.
"Mom, now that you're free from child-rearing, why don't you find a hobby or something enjoyable? Remember how you used to love gardening? Do you still do that?"
I still do a bit of gardening at home. Maybe I should take this time to relearn about different types of flowers and their planting methods.
These days, many people post their gardening pictures on social media, which is fun to look at and can be inspiring. "Let me see your phone, I'll install the app for you."
After saying that, she installed a social media app on my phone. Indeed, there were many beautiful gardening images, and I found them educational. I was impressed that young people nowadays use such convenient and enjoyable things. From that day, I started browsing various posts whenever I had time. Not just gardening, but I also began searching for information on local botanical gardens and nice cafes. One day, I came across a post that caught my eye. It was about a new Italian restaurant in our neighborhood, which I had wanted to visit. But David had said,
"Don't waste my hard-earned money on frivolous things."
So, I wasn't allowed to go out to eat. The post showed a man and a woman dining together, perhaps on a date. They weren't showing their faces, just their hands, a high-end brand purse, and the keys of a luxury car. However, the purse and the style of the nails on the woman's hand seemed similar to Nancy's. And the man's hand didn't seem like Anthony's. It bothered me a little, but it was just a post on social media with no solid proof, so I was confused and didn't know what to do. When I consulted Susan about this, "Got it, I'll look into it a bit," she said. Recently, Anthony and his wife announced they were building a new house. It seems to be a stylish house, heavily influenced by Nancy's preferences.
Nancy keeps adding options, and the initial estimate is now a joke. She insists on a top-tier housemaker. But I can't say no when Nancy asks.
Anthony was in a good mood.
Well, I wanted our house to be nicer than this one. That's okay, right? Anthony has no choice but to listen when a cute wife like Nancy asks for something. I wish Nancy would ask me for something. Oh, really? I wonder what I should ask for.
My presence being ignored, the three of them were excitedly having fun together. Thinking that a loan beyond one's means would only lead to future hardships, I considered sending some cash as a housewarming gift from us, and looked at the drawer with my debit card inside. To my surprise, the debit card containing the $300,000 insurance money left to me by my late husband William was missing. I immediately confronted David about it.
The debit card with the $300,000 insurance money from my late husband William is missing. What did you do with it? Where did you put it?
Then David said,
That money is for Nancy's housewarming. Since it's thanks to me that you have been able to live up till now, that money is mine, right? If you have a problem with that, we can just get a divorce, okay?
Saying this, David flaunted the divorce papers in front of me. That money was precious, left to me by William. Of course, I never intended to use it alone. It was meant to eventually rebuild this old house into a small single-story home where I could spend my twilight years with David. Anthony and Nancy looked at me with malicious grins.
That's right, Jennifer. Wait, you remarried? Then you should be more grateful to David. Did William die of an illness? How sad. But money is useless to someone who's dead. We'll make sure to use it properly in his place. I took you in, Jennifer, even when you had a marriage history. I would appreciate a bit of gratitude. Besides, William died a long time ago. He's none of our concern. Wouldn't William be happier if lovely Nancy used the money more effectively than you, Jennifer? Facing David's nasty grin, I felt my affection for him cooling. Even though David was arrogant and looked down on me, I endured it because I thought he had accepted me and my late husband William, since it wasn't my first marriage. David, didn't you tell me not to worry about not being in my first marriage when we got married? Were those words a lie? Huh? That was just because I thought someone who felt inferior would be easier to manipulate. And it turned out to be true. Mom seemed to be tough on you because of that, but I couldn't care less. I was foolish. I had completely misunderstood. As a last hope, I turned to Anthony. Anthony, I raised you with love in my own way. Do you understand my sadness? What do you think, Anthony? I don't understand your feelings. As long as I have Nancy and money, that's all I need. So, you're giving me the money, right? As a parent, you should do anything for my happiness, right? Fulfill your responsibility. This was truly a shock. Regarding Anthony, I realized it was my responsibility for raising him this way. A feeling of guilt overwhelmed me. However, now that things have come to this, I resolved to focus on protecting myself. Understood. Then, let's get a divorce. Thank you for everything. I said emotionlessly, with a voice surprisingly low, even to myself. David, expecting me to cry and cling to him, looked a bit surprised at first. But then his expression changed to one of pity as he said, "You sure about this? Think hard, okay?" He said, and tossed the divorce papers at me. Anthony and Nancy were distorting their mouths in laughter. They all seemed like aliens to me. How much do they need to belittle others to be satisfied? As I quickly packed my things, I contemplated the future. Once I left the house, I immediately submitted the completed divorce papers to the courthouse. Now we would soon be officially divorced. I rented an apartment a little away from Susan's family's house and started living alone. I didn't persistently pursue David because I had a plan. One day, Anthony called, informing me that David had been arrested for theft.
It was natural for suspicion to arise when someone, now a stranger, tried to withdraw $300,000 from a bank account under my name. At the police station, David claimed,
"I supported Jennifer for years, so her things are mine. What's wrong with me withdrawing this money?"
But such a claim wouldn't hold up. Despite his personality, I thought he was a calm and capable person, but his way of thinking had become so twisted. I felt embarrassed to have spent all these years married to such a man. Anthony seemed to think that if I spoke well of David to the police, his punishment could be lessened. Why would he think I would help lessen David's sentence?
"I'm divorced now. It's none of my concern.
Don't contact me." I hung up the phone. Later investigations revealed that David had been embezzling company funds, leading to his dismissal. This was surprising. Was there a reason he needed money so desperately to commit such a crime? It felt like there were still facts I didn't know. Around the same time as David's arrest, Susan contacted me. She had been investigating the social media account I was curious about. The posts I had previously seen were carefully made without showing faces, but some revealed reflections in mirrors or easily identifiable locations. It was indeed Nancy. Selling personal information for likes, I was appalled by her lack of crisis management skills. Her need for validation was indeed ingrained. Among the posts were some that slandered or defamed others. There were also posts suggesting personal relationships with several people, hinting at infidelity. Susan presented this evidence to Anthony. Anthony, furious, confronted Nancy, but she brazenly responded, "If you have a problem, we can just get divorced, okay?" Showing defiance. Perhaps due to his infatuation, Anthony couldn't bring himself to divorce her. However, it was problematic since some of the men involved had families or held significant positions at work. Moreover, Nancy received a stern warning from her workplace regarding her defamatory posts on social media, making it difficult for her to stay at the company, leading to her resignation. Such actions were typical of Nancy, known for her excessive pride. Well, all of this no longer concerns me. Several months later, I received a call from David. I didn't want to answer, but after several calls, I decided to pick up.
"How many times do you think I've called you?" "Well, never mind. The house is filthy now. No one does any housework. It's like a garbage dump. Jennifer, come and clean it up."
Huh? Who are you?
"What?"
It's you, David.
Your voice has become so old I couldn't recognize you.
Now, what were you saying?
"I said come and clean the house. Can't you understand?"
Why should I, now a stranger, clean your house?
What's with that arrogant tone? You and I were married, so you're also responsible for the house I'm living in.
I have no responsibility. How about doing it yourself? Housework is a simple task, isn't it? I blurted it out, recalling something I had been told in the past.
A man doing housework? I've told you so many times that housework is a woman's job. You're so stupid.
Then how about asking your beloved Nancy? Isn't she currently unemployed, a moocher and a nuisance as you once said? I found myself repeating things I had been told in the past.
I can't possibly ask Nancy to do such things.
I knew that Nancy wasn't capable of housework, but it seemed David was also afraid of being disliked by Nancy, so he couldn't bring himself to ask her for help.
Look, David. You and I are divorced, so we're no longer husband and wife. I have no obligation or responsibility to clean your house. Understand? If you contact me again, I'll consult a lawyer."
After hearing this, David hastily hung up the phone. Several days later, I received another call from David. "Hey, I'm sorry. Please come back. I'm in trouble because I have no money." "Wait, that's it? I'll remarry you. That should work, right? If we remarry, you'll have the responsibility to take care of me, right? This will settle everything. Now, hurry up and do the housework and cook for me." Ugh. Why do you think I would be happy to get back together with you and take care of you? I refuse. Absolutely not. If you keep bothering me like this, I will call the police. I really hope this is the last time he contacts me. It turns out David had been trying to please Nancy by showering her with gifts. Purses, earrings and other accessories, and even the down payment for a luxury car. That's why he embezzled money from his company. Nancy was aware of David's ulterior motives and exploited them fully. Despite everything being exposed, I still can't understand why David and Anthony can't detach themselves from Nancy. One day, Susan said, "Maybe Nancy is what they call a community crusher?" After some research, I found out that this refers to someone who destroys interpersonal relationships within communities like company organizations, university clubs, mom-friend groups, or neighborhood associations. Characteristics include a distorted need for approval, being aggressive and critical towards others. While I'm not sure if Nancy fits the description perfectly, there seem to be many similarities. But as for me, all I can do now is to live my life without any involvement with Nancy and her ilk. Now, they're known in the neighborhood as a problematic family living in a famous garbage house, constantly arguing with each other. Given Nancy's extravagant tastes, the monthly mortgage on the garbage house is apparently quite high. It's said they're falling behind on the payments and will likely lose their home to foreclosure soon. As for me, I'm living alone peacefully in an apartment near Susan's house. I've improved a lot at gardening on my balcony, thanks to learning from social media. I sometimes do part-time jobs in gardening at local parks or botanical gardens, and also participate in volunteering. One of my joys is occasionally babysitting my grandchild and having meals with Susan's family. Susan's husband is a gentle person and is kind to me. I'm very grateful. Looking back, perhaps my late husband William helped expose the true nature of David and Nancy. This experience made me reflect on how I always felt inferior and never took action before. As a result, I've been hurt, and more importantly, I made Susan suffer for a long time. If I'm this hurt, Susan, who was just a child then, must have suffered even more. I also feel sorry for Anthony. From now on, I plan to think for myself and associate with people who value me and whom I value. It's never too late to start. My life is surely just beginning.
Would you mind not coming to the wedding? You're a high school dropout. It's embarrassing. I never thought my own son would say something like this to me. Was it my fault for the way I raised him? Is it because I dropped out of school? Or has my son lost his way? My mind went blank, and it felt like something inside me just snapped. I'm Anastasia. I'll be turning 45 this year. You could say my life has been a turbulent journey. When I was 7, my parents passed away in an unfortunate accident. They had been in a bike crash, and by the time I got to the hospital, they were already gone. To be honest, I don't remember much about that time. The feeling of being left behind was more overwhelming than the sadness. My grandparents and relatives took care of the funeral arrangements. I just sat there. I held the doll my dad bought me and wore the hairpiece my mom made, just sitting like a statue. Then I was taken in by uncle and aunt. Living with them, whom I hadn't been close to, felt awkward. I couldn't treat them like my real parents, and the emotional distance grew wider. On top of that, uncle and aunt didn't get along, and the atmosphere at home was always tense. I was thankful they took me in, but it was not a comfortable place to be. I wanted out. So when it came time to graduate middle school, I made a choice. I decided not to go to high school and instead got a job. Uncle and aunt seemed relieved when I left. I found work in a factory. I chose it because they would hire a dropout, and they offered housing. The work was exhausting, sorting pants, unloading cargo, and other manual labor. That's where I met Daniel. He was 2 years older and mentored me at work.
Anastasia, you're always giving your best, huh?
At 16, I had no idea how good it felt to be complimented. Looking back, I was never really praised by teachers or family growing up. But then I met Daniel, and we clicked right away. We got married when I turned 20. Daniel truly loved me and was always by my side, despite how lonely I used to be. My in-laws were understanding too, never mocking me for dropping out of school. "You've had it rough. Good job getting through it," they'd say. A year later, we were blessed with our son Henry. However, after giving birth, my health didn't bounce back right away. Dizziness and lightheadedness became frequent, making work at the factory difficult. I asked my employer for an office job, but there were no openings. "Sorry, we can't accommodate that right now," they said. There was the option to transfer to another branch, but it was over an hour away from home. With young Henry to consider, commuting wasn't feasible. After discussing it with Daniel, I left my job of 8 years. "You've done your part, Anastasia. You should rest now. I'll pick up the slack," Daniel reassured me. Daniel was indeed working his tail off, just like he said he would. Not only that, he was considerate of my poor health and willingly stepped up to handle childcare and housework. Tragically, Daniel fell ill and passed away when Henry was just 4 years old. More than grief, I felt a strong sense of responsibility. Daniel was gone, and it was up to me to raise Henry on my own. I started job hunting right away, but with no qualifications and a dropout status, nobody would hire me. I was desperate. Maybe I should have gone back to school for some training, but at that time, I was too preoccupied with raising Henry. While full-time jobs were out of reach, I managed to find part-time work inspecting products at a food factory. With my salary and various allowances, plus Daniel's inheritance, we managed to get by. Our mortgage got covered by personal credit insurance, which was a big relief. Father-in-law and mother-in-law offered us financial help, but it's not like they had money to spare. I respectfully declined. Kind father-in-law and mother-in-law, who always watched over Daniel and me warmly. I wanted them to live their later years without worrying about money. I made up my mind to live on, just Henry and me. From that point on, saying I lived for Henry wouldn't be an exaggeration. I didn't want Henry to feel poor or lonely. If he wanted to watch a baseball game, we went to Major League games. If he wanted to go to a tutoring school, I made it happen. Money and time were no object when it came to his needs and dreams. Without a father, I wanted to love him as much as I could. That was my sole focus. I took on part-time jobs and even side gigs to earn a little money. You know what they say, every little bit helps, and it's true. I managed to save up $30,000 from those side gigs over 15 years. When Henry said he wanted to go to college, we were able to send him thanks to Daniel's inheritance and my savings. But most of all, Henry's brilliance earned him a scholarship, which helped a lot. Good job, Henry. I praised my son as much as I could. Henry seemed shy, but happy. He gained confidence, getting academic awards in college and receiving high praise for his research papers. It was wonderful to see. However, Henry started to change, and not in a good way. "People are just stupid. Like that guy. He's nowhere near as smart as me, but acts all high and mighty." Henry began to belittle and mock others. He gained arrogance along with his newfound confidence. "Henry, you shouldn't say things like that." "Mom, listen. Intelligence is what matters in this world. People like me are right." Even towards me, his own mother, Henry's attitude started to change. I figured he was still young, and a bit of arrogance was natural. But then he took a weird turn. "So, where did Dad and you go to college?" Henry asked me one evening at dinner. "Your late dad finished high school, and I dropped out, so neither of us went to college." What? Dropped out? Are you serious? In this day and age?
Henry's eyes widened, his face full of disbelief. He probably didn't know about our educational backgrounds, since we never discussed mine or Daniel's past with him. But was it really that shocking? The disdainful look Henry gave me is something I'll never forget.
How can you even boss me around? You're just a dropout. I can't even think of you as my mother anymore.
His words left me speechless. Henry, watch your mouth.
Shut up. Don't talk back, you dropout.
Henry's shouting echoed throughout the house. From that moment on, he made it a point to belittle me for being a dropout at every opportunity.
So, because you're a dropout, you couldn't even get a decent job? Don't you think that's really messed up in today's world? What do you think? Are you jealous of me, an excellent college grad?
Initially, I was hard on him. But Henry stood firm, refusing to consider dropping out, and eventually I stopped saying anything. Then Henry moved out as soon as he got a job. He'd hang up abruptly whenever I did reach out, so I decided to limit contact. I thought he'd come to realize his mistakes someday. I was convinced he'd eventually realize his mistakes. But then, on an unexpected day, I got a rare call from Henry.
Can I come over?
He asked. Elated by the rare chance to see my son, I happily said yes. When he was living at home, Henry was always in a foul mood. Now he showed up at the door with a bright smile on his face. And he wasn't alone. He brought a beautiful woman with him.
This is Lily. She's a senior at my workplace. And we're on the same fast-track career path. We're planning on getting married,
he said. I was taken aback, but overwhelmingly happy. Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations. Nice to meet you, mother-in-law. I look forward to our future together, Lily said nervously.
Don't be so formal, Lily.
Right, just relax. We're family now. Yes, mother-in-law. Lily seemed to loosen up after I reassured her with a smile. They left after some light pleasantries. I was overjoyed that Henry, my late husband Daniel's legacy, was getting married. Even if we had grown apart, Henry is still the precious legacy of my dear Daniel. No matter the harsh words or the criticism, he's still my cherished son. Seeing Henry today, I wonder if he's had a change of heart, reflecting on his past actions. His attitude towards me seemed normal, and I felt like we could finally return to being just a regular parent and child. But I was mistaken. That same day, Henry called me.
Don't say unnecessary stuff to Lily.
Like what?
About you being a dropout, or your embarrassing job.
Henry started calling me you instead of Mom. It seemed I was wrong about his change of heart. Henry, you shouldn't be thinking like that, I warned.
Shut up. Your low education makes your opinion irrelevant. Stay quiet, dropout,
he said, and abruptly hung up. Nothing had changed. In fact, he'd become even more disrespectful. Where did I go wrong in raising him? I was left feeling like I was on the edge of despair, phone still in hand. Do you knit as a side job, mother-in-law? One day, when Lily came to visit, she saw a bunch of yarn in the living room and asked, Well, yes, I'm not great at it or anything, though. But that's amazing that you do it for work. I've always wanted to try knitting, but I'm so clumsy. Oh, I'd be happy to teach you. Really? That's awesome. When was the last time someone complimented me like that? It reminded me of the good old days when Daniel was still alive. Lily and I started communicating personally, knitting together and even visiting fabric stores. She felt like a true daughter to me. Lily is a considerate and kind woman. The wedding is going to be so much fun. The closer we got, the more I worried about how good of a person Lily was. Would she be okay marrying my son? Henry's the kind of guy who mocks his own mother for dropping out. How he treats his mom will eventually be how he treats his wife.
Henry is gentle in front of Lily, but I'm the only one who knows his other side. Should I tell Lily? But is it my place as a mother to ruin my son's happiness? It was a daily struggle for me.
Actually, can you not attend the wedding?
Despite the wedding being just 2 weeks away, Henry showed up at my house to say this. What are you talking about?
You dropped out, right? It's embarrassing. I want my educated uncles to take the parent seats instead.
Your uncles aren't your parents. It's obviously not going to happen.
Don't make me say it again. Don't embarrass me. Just disown me. Having a dropout for a mother is a stain on my life.
At that moment, something inside me snapped. Talking to someone with such thoughts is a waste of time. The abhorrence in front of me no longer felt like my son. Fine, I'll stop considering you my son. Is that okay with you? I calmly told Henry.
Whatever.
Henry scoffed at my words. Then I'll inform Lily.
No, I'll tell her.
No, I'll make it clear.
Stop. Don't do anything stupid.
I ignored the panicking and yelling Henry. Hi, Lily. It's me. Mother-in-law, what's going on? Henry says he doesn't want me at the wedding, so I'll be absent. What? Why? He's embarrassed to have a dropout mom. Are you sure you want to marry such a prejudiced person? I could sense Lily was at a loss for words over the phone.
What the hell are you saying?
Henry yelled violently. I looked at Henry, expressionlessly.
Give me the phone.
Henry snatched the receiver.
Lily, this isn't... Look.
Henry, you're just... It seemed Lily forcefully hung up on him. Henry stood there, still holding the receiver, looking stunned. Sorry, but this is my house. Please leave. I had no hesitation kicking Henry out in his current state. Sometime after that incident, Lily came to visit our home with her family. Just as Henry was organizing his belongings at my place, I declared that I would throw everything away. That's when Henry hurried back to his parents' home. Henry was taken aback by Lily's sudden visit. Lily wanted to discuss something important, so she sat down with her family. Didn't you know? I thought you did, so I never mentioned it, but I'm a dropout too. Lily is 2 years older than Henry. Because she was his senior, they'd never delved deep into their educational backgrounds or personal lives. Henry had assumed that Lily, being competent and his senior at work, had a college degree like him. Lily said she lost her father when she was young, and her mother when she was in junior high. After that, she was raised by her grandparents. However, her grandparents were already over 70 at that time. Due to financial constraints, she chose to drop out and work. Fortunately, her current employer was understanding and treated her the same as high school or college graduates. Her grandparents had passed away, and she had told Henry beforehand that her uncle and aunt would attend the wedding. I'm shocked that you're such a bigot, said Lily. Although Lily spoke calmly, her words were filled with anger. Lily's uncle and aunt, sitting next to her, felt the same. Her uncle Jeffrey scolded.
You're an outrageous person. Aren't you ashamed for belittling the woman who raised you? Who do you think helped you get this far? Why don't you realize that?
Henry, who had never been scolded by anyone else, looked devastated. Lily just watched him coldly. I can't imagine marrying you. Please call off the engagement. Lily firmly told Henry.
Hold on. Call off the engagement?
Henry desperately pleaded with Lily.
I love you. Don't say things like that.
That's when Jeffrey intervened.
Henry, enough is enough. I also ask you to please call off the engagement. She can't marry someone like you. I'm really sorry. What about the wedding expenses, the cancellation fees? I'll pay for half. You'll cover the rest.
Jeffrey decisively said. Henry was just standing there, staring blankly. I'm sorry for staying quiet till now. I apologized. Please don't say sorry, Anastasia. Can I call you that? I really enjoy knitting with you, and I want to continue learning from you. Of course. Although Henry and Lily broke up, I continued to be in touch with her, but I cut off contact with Henry. Mom, I'm sorry. Henry, there are things in life you can't undo. I've decided to think of you as gone, as if my son is dead. So to me, you're now a stranger. Mom, don't say that. Don't call me Mom anymore. You're not my son. Henry broke down crying on the spot. Abandoned by his fiancée, and even by his own mother, Henry found himself utterly alone. But honestly, I didn't feel a shred of pity for him. All I felt was emptiness. Years later, oh, Lily, it's been a while. Anastasia, long time no see. After breaking off the engagement, Lily had transferred to another branch, so we seldom saw each other. She told me she's now seriously dating a man she met in her new city. We're thinking about marriage, but we're taking it slow. That sounds wise. By the way, do you know how Henry is doing? Finally, I got an update on Henry, whom I hadn't been in touch with for a long time. Turns out, word got out in the company about why we broke off the engagement, and he became a total outcast. People stopped giving him work, saying he's unreliable, for berating the mother who raised him. He was shifted to a do-nothing job. Well, who'd want to associate with someone who'd say such terrible things? He really regrets what he said to you, Lily said. Does he? Well, I couldn't care less now. It's really sad that he only realized this now. Even when Lily talked about my son like that, it felt like she was talking about someone else's problem, not mine. In truth, Henry visited our home once after all that happened. He couldn't stand that I wasn't answering his calls or texts. Mom, I'm really sorry. I want to mend our relationship starting now. Henry bowed deeply, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. It's too late. Give it up. With those words, I sent Henry away. The last lesson I could offer as a parent was the harshness of the world. Since then, I've remarried. The tough times you've been through? Let's turn them into happiness moving forward. Matthew told me, accepting all of my past. I'm incredibly happy now. And maybe, just maybe, this happiness is a gift from Daniel in heaven. I savor each day as I live it. As for Henry, to be honest, I'm not even sure if I feel he's my son anymore. Was that really my son? I can't help but question it. Did I ever imagine that I'd feel this way towards Henry, the son I was willing to give up my own life to protect? No, no one could have ever seen this coming. This is the last life lesson I can give you. In my heart, I make this plea to Henry. All I can do now is sever ties with my son and make him reflect on the gravity of what he's done. That's all that there's left for me to do.
My name is Linda. I'm in my 50s, leading a leisurely life, juggling a part-time job and hobbies. My husband, William, celebrated his 60th birthday this year and switched to a contract basis, continuing his work at his own pace. We have a 32-year-old son, Jack. Though his adolescence was a bit challenging, he now exhibits a sense of calm that's hard to believe. He's settled into his dream job and seems to be enjoying his single life living alone. And we have one more member of our family, my mother-in-law, Sue. Sue, who turned 90 this year, is spending her day in the sun, petting a cat on the porch. She's the very picture of a charming country granny. 3 years ago, I was saved by this Granny Sue, and I think I'll tell you that story. I'm bringing my fiancé home on Saturday. One spring day, we received such a call from our son, and William and I were over the moon. After all, we'd always wondered when our son, who was at the right age, would get married. Of course, it's enough for us if he is happy, even without getting married. Still, we, who are likely to pass away before him, can't help but wish someone to be by our only son's side. Linda, I can't find any socks without holes. Oh dear, William, look properly. And by the way, I prepared the macaroons for tea. What do you think? Macaroon? What's that? While we lead a rather casual life, we were bustling to make a good impression on the woman coming from the city. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was leisurely drinking tea on the porch. Nice to meet you. My name is Nancy. The woman who came home with our son, Nancy, greeted us with a charming smile. The well-groomed black hair and white dress suited Nancy, who had a modest atmosphere, and we both had a good impression of her. Surrounded by the cake she brought us as a gift and macaroons, our first meeting went on peacefully. By the way, Jack isn't biologically related to you, right? Until Nancy started with that. Oh, you heard it from Jack. Yes, he has a different mother. It's a common question, so I answered as usual. His mother passed away when he was 3. I married Linda when Jack was 8. My husband William naturally explained. I'm his second wife. To our son Jack, I'm his stepmother. Oh, Jack, it must have been hard for you suddenly having a new mom. Nancy sympathized with Jack, a look of concern on her face. At her response, I found myself slightly taken aback, but Jack swiftly countered. No, it was more like my request. I told Dad, I want Linda to be my mom, so please marry her. That's right. Linda was always very good to Jack, and Jack opened up to her. That's why I decided to marry her. You're exaggerating. Originally, William and I had a boss-subordinate relationship at work. Since we lived close by, we naturally became close, often commuting together. I had many opportunities to meet young Jack. Being the eldest of 4 siblings, I loved playing with younger kids and had become close with Jack even before I did with William. Jack took a liking to me, and that's why I decided to marry William. That's true. Is that so? Nancy responded, sounding rather nonchalant despite bringing up the topic herself. She seemed to have her own pace. Where's Grandma? Jack, having finished his snacks, looked around. She's out on the porch. Just as usual. Grandma? Nancy inquired, tilting her head in curiosity. My grandma also lives here. She's a bit senile and is always basking in the sun. Oh. Say hello to her before you leave. Now, when are you planning to have the wedding? Nancy's eyes lit up as she replied. June 1st. Oh, it's coming soon. When did you two start dating? I added. Since last Christmas. Last Christmas? I found myself echoing her answer. Wait, so you haven't even been together for half a year? Is that a problem? Her previously twinkling eyes suddenly dimmed, which made me anxious. No, it's not like that. I think it's pretty quick. Any reason? William chimed in, covering up my panic. She wanted to have a wedding while she's still in her 20s. Oh, I see. I can understand that feeling. That's right. My parents also want me to get married quickly and have a child of their own blood. I see. There seemed to be an implication in her words. I wondered if I was the only one picking up on it. Well, you two are adults, so we won't interfere, but remember, both marriage and the ceremony are your responsibilities, okay? Yes, Jack nodded confidently. Nancy looked at him adoringly. I need to stop being so nervous about their young love and support them as a mother. Apparently, they had a hotel reservation for the evening, so they were leaving before dinner. Sue, Jack is leaving now, I said, tapping my mother-in-law, who was dozing off on the porch. How old is she? Nancy suddenly asked from behind me, causing me to jump. There stood Nancy, smiling sweetly. She just turned 87 this year. Oh, that's a relief then. Relief? What was she relieved about? Hey, old lady. Old lady? I was baffled by her transformation and being addressed as old lady. She was mocking my confusion. I have no intention of taking care of a stranger like you. Once you've seen us off, I'd like you to leave this house. Eh? You can attend the wedding, but know your place. Jack's too kind to say it, but I don't think he wants his stepmother pretending to be his real mother at his wedding. Nancy spouted venom and slowly approached me as if cornering me. Was her smile always this terrifying? Despite her eyes not smiling, her mouth curled unnaturally. "Nancy, let's go." Jack's voice called from the entrance, and Nancy's face instantly brightened. "Okay." "Remember, old lady, I won't pamper you once I become Jack's wife, so be prepared." After whispering in my ear with a low voice, Nancy walked away with a spring in her step as if she was about to skip. Left behind, cold sweat trickled down my cheeks. I realized that Nancy had never once called me Linda, but kept addressing me as old lady, just like I'm a stranger. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was in a whirl. The next morning, William noticed my pallid complexion. "What's wrong? You look down." "Do I? Feeling lonely because Jack is getting married?" "Yes, I am. He's the son I cherished and raised. I'm sure Jack will often come home with grandchildren. His bride seems to be a good girl," William assured. "Yes, she does." Indeed, Nancy had not been harsh towards anyone but me, Jack's stepmother. I never expected her to take care of me, and I'm fine with Jack inheriting everything, but we never discussed this with Jack. I thought I'd established a relationship with him no different from any other parent and child. But what if Nancy was right, and Jack was considering my future a burden? If I just leave this house, could Jack build a beautiful family with her? In the evening, I head out to the porch to bring in the laundry. My mother-in-law, Sue, is sitting there with a cat in her lap, gazing out at the garden. Next to her, there are a variety of store-bought cookies and candy lined up. "Oh my, looks like you've got some more offerings here. The neighborhood kids brought them over." "I bet they use their pocket money to thank you, Sue. You see, around these parts, Granny Sue is something of a local celebrity." Sue's regular spot on the porch overlooks a road across the garden, so it's easy to strike up a conversation with passers-by. This is a small town, and folks from the neighborhood sometimes pop in for a chat. Somehow it started that when people talked to Sue, their problems were solved. People say that if you consult with Granny Sue, she'll give you advice as if she's seen it all herself. Rumors like that spread, and before we knew it, there was this urban legend going around that Granny Sue has clairvoyant powers. I really don't know how many people's troubles Sue has helped resolve. On the flip side, she's getting a bit senile, and there are times when a conversation doesn't really pan out. Still, everyone seems content when they leave, and some even leave thank you gifts like this, so she must be doing something right. It's a bit of a security concern, but it stimulates Sue, and either my husband or I am always home, so we let it slide. It's kind of fun to have an urban legend in the house. "Linda?" "Yes. You don't need to worry about anything. That girl and Jack won't be getting married." "What?" Without me saying a word, Sue hits the nail on the head of my worry. It's quite a surprise. "How do you know they won't get married?" "Just look at her face. It tells me everything." Her face? Indeed, the face she showed while cornering me was straight out of a horror movie. If I were a man, I wouldn't want to marry her. But I wonder if there's any chance for Jack to see that face before their wedding. "Also, your daily deeds will prove themselves." "Mine? What do you think I should do, Sue?" "Well, Linda, oh, look at these cookies. They look yummy. Who gave you these?" "Oh, Sue." At critical moments, she'd retreat back into her dream world. Yet her words still lightened my heart. Sue isn't some supernatural oracle. My father-in-law used to run a business, but he was too trusting and got conned often. So she ended up handling all of the social affairs instead of my father-in-law. I think she honed her discernment of people during that time, and it's still with her. That's probably why she's always drawing people in, and why I trust her so much. Sue's words made up my mind. I won't intervene. I won't meddle in my son's marriage. That's the right thing to do. I've loved my son Jack with all my heart. I'll just support whatever he decides. If he ever comes asking for help, then I'll do everything I can to protect him. Even when I'm anxious and doing nothing feels tough, Still, I decided to trust my non-blood related family and carry on with my daily life as usual. I'm sorry, I think the marriage is off. In the middle of May, Jack, who had suddenly come home, shared this with a somber face. He seemed to have lost some weight since we last met in the spring. Sue's prophecy had quickly come true. While I was surprised, it also felt inevitable. What happened? You both seemed so happy. She had a debt, nearly $50,000. 50? How does someone so young get into so much debt? She was spending it on designer bags and her favorite international artists. She often said she was going abroad for concerts or to buy designer items, but I never thought she was going into debt for it. That's intense. Did Nancy tell you about the debt? No. When we sent out wedding invitations to her friends and relatives, they all declined. Nancy blew up. Her reaction was so strange, so I discreetly asked her friends. They told me she hasn't paid me back the money I lent her, or she stole my belongings and boyfriend. Oh my. When I confronted her, she got defensive and said it's low to snoop around other people's business. We couldn't talk it out, so I called her parents. They said, "You're going to be a couple, don't dwell on the past. A real man would pay off her debt." What? And then she casually mentions her parents are in debt. Apparently, they used to be rich but seem to have failed in their business. However, they couldn't lower their standard of living and have been living by repaying debt with debt. And she's saying things like, it'll all be fine if we support each other. Jack, she's clearly planning to leech off of you. Right? That's why I've decided to call off the engagement. I was a fool not to realize she was such an insincere woman. It seems like she was rushing the marriage to keep me from escaping. Jack, I expect a dispute over the cancellation fee for the venue and our broken engagement, but I'll fight it myself, considering it as a learning experience. I only want to let my parents know that the wedding is off. I'm sorry. I know you were looking forward to it. A powerless laugh escapes Jack, a sight that wrenches my heart. Then my husband William, who had been quietly listening to our son's story, finally speaks. Never mind us. Your happiness is what matters most. If you're in trouble, come to us any time. Isn't that right, Linda? William is asking for my agreement, so I respond with a smile. Of course, you're our precious son. Mom. It seems Jack has been keeping up a strong front all along. Tears well up in his eyes, a sign of relief. Blood relations don't matter. I decide anew that I will always stand by my son's side. A few days later, when William was away on business, Nancy, with a devilish expression, came storming into our home. It's impressive that she made it all the way to our countryside home by herself. Nancy, as if all her pristine image was a lie, glares at me with eyes filled with hatred. I flinch slightly at her openly hostile demeanor, but rally myself thinking of Jack. Linda, you must have manipulated Jack. I haven't said a word. You liar. The gentle Jack I know wouldn't call off our marriage. It seems you've done enough to merit it, haven't you? All I wanted was to make Jack happy. Plus, only I, a princess, can free the prince from the witch's curse. Despite telling him countless times, he can't seem to wake up from the witch's brainwash. Prince, huh? And witch? Well, I don't mind if she's referring to Jack as a prince, but a witch? Who's she talking about? It seems in her head, stepmothers are always the witches leading princes astray. And referring to herself as a princess, isn't she embarrassed? Even so, I came to understand that she was speaking ill of me even to my son. Just because we don't share the same blood. When Jack came to talk about the breakup, he didn't mention that. He was probably being considerate of me. A princess who scams her friends out of their boyfriends and money? That's laughable. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Jack is, well, he's my ideal prince. He's handsome, tall, kind, smart, and works for a good company. He was supposed to become my hero, protecting me from unpleasant people who blame me. Only a princess like me suits Jack. Just as I found it difficult to argue while she was praising my son, a stern voice thundered from behind. That's enough. Sue, My mother-in-law, who was supposed to be on the porch, was now standing in front of Nancy. "What? Why are you here? Don't disturb me." Nancy, who did not expect my mother-in-law to intervene, also looked puzzled. There was something strange about my mother-in-law today. Should I call it divine? Her eyes were more wide open than usual, and she had an unusually powerful presence. Slowly, my mother-in-law held up a hand mirror, which she had somehow gotten hold of, to Nancy. "Do you see a princess when you look at this face?" Seeing her own face, Nancy became disconcerted. Perhaps she couldn't do her usual convenient mental gymnastics in front of the sudden mirror. There must have been a terribly distorted face reflected in it. "To me, it looks like an evil witch. You are so sinful. You wouldn't find happiness even if you married Jack. It's a pity. Oh, what a pity." It was not anger but pity in her eyes as she stared at Nancy. Her pure sympathy must have been too much for the prideful girl to bear. "Ah!" She ran off from the front door, her hair flailing, crying and wailing. I also felt my strength drain away, and I involuntarily crouched down. Oh, that was scary. "Sue, thank you." Saying that and looking up, I saw my mother-in-law smiling down at me. "You have a good face, you know." Her crinkled warm hand enveloped my cold one. "The wrinkles around your eyes, on your hands, they're proof of the smiles and effort you've put into this house, Linda." "Oh, Sue." Indeed, my mother-in-law always recognized the effort I put in. When I decided to marry my husband, there was quite a lot of opposition from my husband's family due to our age difference and the fact that I was to become a stepmother. But Sue was the only one on my side, saying, "Linda's face shows her heart. Her smiles are genuine, and her hands are those of a hard worker. That's why I became part of the family with my husband and son." "Linda," my mother-in-law's clear eyes looked into mine, "is breakfast ready yet?" I nearly lost my balance from surprise. "It's almost time for dinner, so just wait a bit longer." With a face half laughing, half crying, I took my mother-in-law's hand this time. As he had promised, my son Jack managed to break off his engagement on his own. The cancellation fees for the wedding were negotiated to be covered by her side. Even though Jack managed it on his own, he had consulted a colleague at work who introduced him to a good lawyer. I think it's also a testament to Jack's ability to have built such helpful connections. Nancy never dared to set foot in this house again. When the discussion about the broken engagement took place, it was only her parents who were desperate to make Jack pay a large amount of compensation. She seemed to be out of spirit, as if her soul had been drained. I guess my mother-in-law's words and the sight of her own horrific reflection must have come as a shock. 3 years have passed since then. Jack seemed to have become wary of women for a while, but it looks like he finally found a woman he wants to marry again. She's a nice person who positively reflects me as a stepmother, saying, "It's great that Jack has 2 wonderful moms." Sue looks pleased too, saying, "She has a nice smile." Over 90, Sue is still as cheerful as ever, soaking up the sun on the porch. Her hearing has gotten worse and she doesn't seem to catch much of what people say. But still, people continue to come to visit Granny Sue and talk to her. She doesn't seem to give advice anymore, but it doesn't seem to matter. Everyone leaves with a smile on their face. Sue is like a sunny spot. She has a mysterious power to brightly and correctly illuminate everyone. My son's wedding is just around the corner, so please stay healthy for a little longer, Sue.
After our divorce, my ex-husband clung to this bizarre belief that I still loved him, which was both frustrating and far from the truth. What's more, he was convinced that the sole reason for our split was his mother, Jessie, as if resolving issues with her would magically fix everything. That thought alone was enough to infuriate me. I married Ken, who was 8 years older than me, when I was in my early 20s. Ken, being older, had a domineering attitude and a sharp tongue, but back then, I was young and naively thought, He's so manly and wonderful. I accepted everything about him without question. When he complained about my cooking or how I cleaned, and said, "I'm telling you this for your own good," I believed him, thinking, that's wonderful. And when he told me to walk 3 steps behind him on dates, I obediently agreed. My friends expressed disgust at this and warned me it wasn't right, but I was so deeply in love with Ken, having pursued him first, that their concerns fell on deaf ears. Looking back, I deeply regret how I treated those who tried to advise me, even cutting ties with them and cutting off all communication. My parents weren't fond of Ken either and opposed our marriage until the very end. But in my pathologically optimistic state, I thought, if I get pregnant, they'll have to accept it. This led to a regrettable decision to force my parents to accept the marriage by getting pregnant with my eldest daughter. This regrettable incident is still mentioned by my mom as a back then story. Now, a mother of 3 daughters, I painfully realize how reckless I was, and worry about my children potentially making the same mistakes. So we got married in a shotgun wedding, and I gave birth. Ken didn't become more involved in household chores or childcare. He remained detached, even as I struggled with new motherhood. I repeatedly asked for his help with childcare, but he always had excuses like, "I have work," or "I've never raised a child, so I don't know how." Eventually, I resigned myself to doing it alone. Thankfully, my mom came to help, which was a saving grace. Without her, I shudder to think what would have happened. As for my relationship with my in-laws, it wasn't great. Jessie, my mother-in-law, who prided herself on having 3 sons, exclaimed upon the birth of my first daughter, "You should have had a boy like me." As if the gender of the baby mattered, when all I wanted was for them to be born healthy. Even after that, Jessie would come to our house unannounced, not to help like a mom would, but to lecture me. She'd say things like, "You need to have a male heir," or "Having girls is pointless since they'll just marry and leave." Her advice wasn't helpful, just a series of meaningless admonitions. She would come, make herself feel better by lecturing, and then leave. Her snide remarks didn't stop even as my eldest daughter grew. If I mentioned sending her to daycare, Jessie would say, "It's sad that a mother isn't with her child." Or if my daughter was shy around strangers, "It's because you work and don't give her enough love." Before getting married, I thought I had to cherish Ken's mom because I loved him, but becoming a mom myself made me stronger. Ken wouldn't budge, no matter how much I complained, so I started to speak up directly to Jessie. As expected, this led to frequent mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts. Ken finally started to intervene, albeit only 1 in 3 times. Initially, Ken was of no use, always defending his mom. But when Jessie mistook a gift I chose for Mother's Day as Ken's choice and complained about it for an hour, or when she blamed me for a stomachache after eating sweets Ken bought, saying it was because of the bad sweets I gave her, he began to see my point. Finally, Ken took my side completely and apologized for the first time since our marriage, admitting his mom was wrong. We had serious discussions about sharing household chores and childcare, my pent-up feelings, and dealing with Jessie. Gradually, Ken began to participate more in housework and childcare. He started to shield me from Jessie's constant jabs. He wasn't perfect, but he had changed a lot compared to before. I still resent him for leaving me alone with a newborn, though. I still resent having to take care of a newborn all by myself, which was incredibly tough. Even then, there were times when I was mocked, but by that point, I had grown a thicker skin and could just brush it off with a, yeah, or assertively telling someone when I really didn't like something. When our eldest daughter was 4, I found out I was pregnant with our second child. This time, Ken, who hadn't done much during my first pregnancy, started to take initiative. When I was laid up with morning sickness, he would prepare simple dishes for our daughter or hang the laundry, albeit a bit wrinkled. I was very grateful for his help, but Jessie couldn't stand being silent about it. Somehow, she heard that Ken was doing chores and stormed into our house uninvited, looking furious. "What are you doing making your husband do housework? Morning sickness is nothing serious. When I was pregnant, I did all the housework. even when I was bleeding. If it's that hard, you should just quit your job and take care of the house. This is the problem with working women, always so weak and whiny." After saying her piece, she left huffing and puffing. I told Ken about this, and he strongly confronted Jessie. It was astonishing how she could brag about doing household chores in such a dangerous state during her pregnancy. Ken's reprimand seemed to work as she stopped barging in. However, during my second pregnancy, I developed complications and had to be hospitalized. I had only told my parents, not my in-laws, but somehow Jessie found out. Despite being told that only my husband could visit, she barged into the hospital, causing a scene in the waiting room, shouting, "I'll set my son's wife straight." Afterwards, Jessie was lectured and escorted out by the doctors and nurses. I apologized profusely to them, feeling embarrassed and sorry. The nurses said it was a common occurrence, which was a sad realization in itself. Afterwards, thanks to the help of the nurses and Ken's support, I safely gave birth to our second daughter. She inherited my features, hooded eyelids, and natural curly hair, unlike our first daughter, who has Ken's distinct double eyelids. But she was just as precious to me as our first, the most beautiful child in the world. However, Jessie found something to criticize again. When we went to show the baby to Ken's parents after getting discharged, Jessie looked at our second daughter and said, "She has such an unlucky look on her face. It's depressing to watch. This must be because you worked during pregnancy. And another girl? You really are useless. In the old days, girls were considered so worthless they were given away." I was so fed up with her that we left immediately. I unloaded all my pent-up frustrations and sadness from her insult to our second daughter on Ken, crying my heart out, and warned him, "If you make me deal with that woman again, it's divorce." Honestly, I wouldn't have minded divorcing at that point, considering everything. But Ken promised to keep us away from her, so I decided to trust him and leave the rest to him. True to his promise, my daughters and I never met Jessie again, and Ken only occasionally visited her. I heard Jessie was angry, but I didn't care. It was all her fault after all. So when I got pregnant with our third child, I didn't tell her, and even after the birth, I never let her meet the baby. Our third child was also a girl, which made me even less inclined to let her meet Jessie. I knew she would just make another snide comment like, "Another girl, huh?" For decades, my daughters and I lived without any contact with Jessie, enjoying stress-free Christmases and Thanksgivings, until one incident shattered our peaceful family life and led to our separation. The incident was Jessie injuring her leg and becoming unable to move around as she used to. Ken told me about it after returning from his parents' house, and my response was just, "Oh, really?" But then, in the next moment, Ken said something absurd. "I want to invite Mom to our house." He had even already told her she could come. That's what real aversion feels like. I couldn't understand why he would make such a decision. First of all, Ken's unmarried younger brother lives with Jessie at the in-laws' house, so there's no need to bring her to our house for care. When I pointed this out, Ken suddenly declared, "I'm the eldest son, so I should take care of her," despite never using the eldest son argument before. Apparently, Jessie did most of the housework, leaving the younger brother incapable of managing anything. I suggested, why not share the caregiving responsibilities with your brother at your parents' house? Ken responded, "But I'm the eldest son, and I've never really shown my gratitude to Mom. This is my last chance to show my appreciation. We don't know how many years she has left." By the way, Jessie is robust other than her leg injury, with no issues in her health checkups. While it's fine for him to show gratitude to his parents however he wants, I told him, "I have work, so I won't get involved, and I won't allow her in our house." Ken retorted, "But your salary from your clerical job isn't that significant, right? I've indulged your whims until now by not visiting my parents' house. But now you can't help with an emergency situation? Really? Mom was right. Working women are inflexible and charmless. You were the one who confessed to me, and now you can't even support me a little?" He sighed in exasperation. Then, to my shock, he produced a complete divorce application and said, "Think about this," and left without waiting for my reply. I couldn't stop crying as I looked at the filled-out divorce application. I couldn't help but wonder why I ever married such a terrible man. I was overwhelmed with tears of regret. Was Ken really perceiving my refusal to visit his parents' house due to Jesse's harassment as just my whim? Had he forgotten how his own children were constantly belittled by her? The reason I worked was because Ken's salary alone wasn't enough to support us. Yet he saw my job as another one of my whims. That's ridiculous. Fortunately, our children were already independent, so there were no child support expenses. My salary wasn't high, but it was enough for me to live on my own. And with a full-time job, I had a decent bonus, so there were no financial worries. Deciding this, I packed my belongings, informed my children of the divorce, and they unanimously supported my decision, saying I had endured enough. I then moved to a business hotel and filed the divorce papers the next day. When I explained the situation to my parents, they just shook their heads, saying they had opposed the marriage for this reason. After filing, I contacted Ken to inform him that I had submitted the divorce application. He called me immediately, angrily asking, "Why did you file it?" I responded, "You told me to think about it, right? So I thought about it and decided to file. Is there a problem?" He replied, "I didn't mean it like that, and I didn't think you would actually file it." What? Did you think showing me the divorce papers would make me comply? Wow, I didn't know you could be so deceitful. The person I fell in love with wasn't like that. Besides, anyone who uses threats and divorce papers to get their way would instantly kill any love I had. I can't trust or live with someone so cowardly. When he asked, "Don't you still love me anymore?" I replied, "I did. But at that moment, I started to hate you. There's no reason to love someone who threatens me with divorce papers." I said this with a surprisingly cold voice and then hung up the phone and turned it off. After turning my phone back on, I saw many missed calls from Ken, but I had nothing left to say to him, so I didn't call back. Then Ken came to my parents' house, pleading at the front door for me to come back and deeply apologizing. Of course, my answer was no. I reiterated the reasons I had given over the phone. As he continued to complain and express dissatisfaction, I said, "You say you want me to come back, but you just want a servant to take care of Jessie, right? It seems like you've already told your siblings you'd take her in, and now no one is willing to help you. Am I wrong? Besides, you said it yourself. You want to show gratitude to your parents. Without me, you can do that to your heart's content. Isn't that great?" He didn't argue, so probably I was right. Still, he wouldn't leave, so I threatened to call the police, and that made him leave, looking disappointed and defeated. Afterwards, I messaged him saying, "If you come again, I won't hesitate to call the police." He didn't respond. There was no further contact from him, and I continued my life as usual, but one day, I received a call from Annie, the wife of Ken's second brother, the third son, with whom I had had little interaction. I hadn't seen or contacted her since I stopped going to the in-laws' house. Annie, too, had been harassed by Jesse. Apparently, Jesse had some pretty harsh things to say to Annie, who couldn't have children, which led to Annie and her husband, Ken's brother, moving far away and effectively cutting ties with the in-laws. The reason Annie contacted me was, of course, related to the in-laws. She knew about our divorce because Ken had told his brother, and Annie shared with me what had happened to Ken afterwards. As expected, Ken had planned to leave all of Jesse's care to me, but my divorce had thrown his plans into disarray. In a panic, Ken called a family meeting with his brothers. However, since he had already boasted about taking in Jesse as the eldest son, there was conflict when the story changed, leading to a fight among the brothers. The second son insisted he couldn't help because he didn't know housework and was busy with work. The third son, whose wife had a history of being harassed, refused to have anything to do with Jesse. With his brothers adamantly refusing to cooperate and no resolution in sight, Ken stubbornly declared, "Then I'll take care of her, you ungrateful people," and took Jessie in. He accused them of lacking gratitude towards their parents, but I think Ken, who first said he would take her and then backed out, is the one who failed to fulfill his responsibility to his parents. Taking care of her while working must be tough. Everyone at work said the same. Also, during the discussion, my husband mentioned that Ken still believed you must love him, blaming Jessie for driving you apart. So there might be a chance that he will try to contact you again. I don't want to bring up Ken's matters, but I thought I should warn you. Hearing this gave me chills. After everything that had happened, how could he still believe I had any love left for him? It seems from what I heard that Ken doesn't think the divorce was his fault. I thanked Annie and ended the call, staying alert for a while, but there was no contact from Ken. Years passed without any incident, and I thought my worries had been unnecessary. But Annie's warning eventually became a reality. Nearly 10 years after the divorce, I received a call from Ken. Expecting nothing good, I answered, but it was just small talk at first. Growing impatient with the pointless conversation, I told him I'd hang up if he had nothing important to say. He then hurriedly began talking about his situation. Ken's life had been as Annie suspected. Taking care of Jessie while working was extremely difficult. He often had to miss work for caregiving duties, and Jessie, frustrated with her inability to move as she wished, started taking it out on Ken. Initially, it was just venting, but her paranoia escalated, accusing Ken of stealing her wallet and screaming at him as a thief. Realizing something was seriously wrong, Ken took a reluctant Jessie to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with dementia. Despite being prescribed medication, she didn't calm down. She would scream loudly enough for the neighborhood to hear, claiming that strangers were entering the house and attacking her. With her physical strength still intact, she even started wandering outside, pushing her walker. Ken, finally reaching his limit, decided to place Jessie in a facility and humbly asked his brothers to share the costs. Recently, they managed to find a place for her. After hearing everything, my immediate response was, "So what?" I was even surprised by my own unconscious reaction. Ken seemed even more shocked. I told him, "If someone else told me this, I might say, that's tough, but honestly, I couldn't care less about you guys. Why are you even telling me this? So what if she's in a facility? It's none of my business." When he asked why I was being so cold, I replied, "What? You wanted sympathy or a there from your ex-wife? You're a man over 60 seeking comfort from an ex-wife. That's creepy. We were married once, but now we're strangers. I'll say it again. I don't love you or anything like that. I'm indifferent. I'm happy post-divorce, so stop disturbing my life." Then I hung up and blocked Ken's contact details, something I should have done long ago. I thought that would make it clear to Ken, but I was naive. Later, a letter from Ken arrived at my parents' house. The letter, written over 4 pages, was more like a creepy note than a love letter. It said, "I'm sorry for being a coward who didn't protect you from the devil that was Mom. She tore us apart, but now that devil is gone. There's nothing to stop us. I know it's been a long detour, but if any of your feelings remain, I'm ready to accept your love. Come back with nothing but yourself." Reading it with my mom, we both felt disgusted. Apparently, Ken also reached out to our daughters, asking for their help to reconcile, but all of them refused, and my dad even scolded him, saying he was the problem. Enraged, Ken apparently accused our daughters of being ungrateful for his financial support for their education. But when our eldest asked him if he really thought I'd want to reconcile with someone who spoke so arrogantly, he lost his earlier bluster and fell silent. Though my daughters are still living independently, and it's unlikely Ken would go to them, I still warned them to be cautious and shared the content of the letter. There was a time when I heard that men often think every woman they date is interested in them, but I shrugged it off as unlikely. Now, I can't believe it was actually true. After more than a decade since our separation, Ken sending such a letter proves he still doesn't think he's at fault. But of course, there's no chance of repairing our relationship. Now that he's been rejected by his own daughters, he can spend his lonely old age alone.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sarah tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sarah y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sarah quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sarah completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sarah se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sarah quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sarah era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Dicen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Dicen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sarah había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sarah llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sarah era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sarah comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, Pren, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre Pren antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Dicen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Lisen, primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometí hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el tercer piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al séptimo piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de 1 hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos 2 objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del listen. Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche, me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado, dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones, intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre, aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente, Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales, 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco, parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas, había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos, Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento, se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche, no había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta, los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse. No hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marche Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshall no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sarah. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sarah era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sarah, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marshall. Malcolm Eugene Foote resistió al principio, pero David y Marshall lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sara y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sara conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.